give them a hard time, is that what you said?
And there's Alan. I mean, she's kind of out us. We just ignore those guys. You should have seen what I wanted city council to do last night.
Well, the reason why they don't have a front elevation is because there's nothing on the facade.
Right.
There's no window.
It's blank. Is Jeff gonna be here?
Doesn't look like.
Anne, are we waiting for Jeff to join us? Or should we wait for Jeff to join us?
We can go ahead and get started. And Commissioner Doug is not going to be with us.
Okay. Tell you what, let me. Okay. We're going to start our meeting. Please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Arkin?
Here.
Commissioner Moss?
Here?
Commissioner Pilch?
Here.
Chair Eisenman?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Donaldson is at another meeting this evening. He may be joining us later.
Did I just tell your agenda? Do you want me to ask for one? Didn't write it. Okay. Thank you. We're going to move forward with new business, the general plan housing element update review. And remind me, do we have a staff report on that, or do we go directly to Mr. Miller?
He is ours.
He is our staff report.
I think I'm delivering the staff report on
Okay.
this. And we do have a PowerPoint for this evening's item. I think we're officially calling this a study session. It's really intended to give you an update on where we are with the housing element and what the next steps are. As you know, we've been having a series of study sessions on the general plan update. This is the 8th of those, and 5 have dealt with the housing element. So I promise we're going to turn to land use and transportation soon. But we did want to bring you up to date, just for the benefit of the public who may be watching this home or in the audience. The housing element is the part of the general plan that includes the city's policies and programs for housing conservation, housing production, and special needs housing. It is the only part of the general plan that's subject to certification by the state. Cities and counties have to submit their housing elements to the Department of Housing and Community Development on a cycle that is established by the state. Right now, we're in an 8-year planning cycle that started in 2007. It actually ends at the end of 2014. January 31st, 2015 is the start of the next cycle. So we are late to the table here, but we're trying to catch up and get this adopted and certified by the state before the end of the planning period. Right after this is adopted, we will begin work on the 2015 housing element. We've actually already begun work on the 2015 element, so we are moving forward. To recap the process, this has actually been going on since 2008. Work was first initiated on the housing element at that time. First draft was completed in 2009 and submitted to the state. Comments came back in October of 2009, and then there was a hiatus from the element as other priorities intervened and as there were staff resource cuts at that point. Work resumed in early 2013, and there was a second draft, a new draft of the housing element completed, which included goals, policies, and programs in October. We did have 4 study sessions with the commission plus a town meeting during that time. On October 15th, the commission recommended forwarding a working draft of the housing element to the city council. They subsequently recommended submitting that to the state for an administrative review, and that review took place between October 25th and December 26th. The state reviewers have 60 days to review the element. They typically take the full 60 days. What they did at the end of that period is say, you're not quite there yet. You have some additional changes we want to see to your housing element before we will deem you in compliance with state law. What we are here to talk with you about tonight are the changes that we are proposing to make to the document to respond to the state's comments. And I have a series of slides that I'll run through that highlight those changes. And then if there are questions or comments, I'm happy to answer those. We also wanted to provide another opportunity for the public to comment on the proposed changes and other issues relating to the housing element. I did want to go over the agenda packet. It's a rather long agenda packet and somewhat complicated, so I just wanted to go over what was in that packet. Following the staff report, there were 4 exhibits. The first is the actual letter that the city received from HCD on December 26th. It's about 5 pages long, and it essentially lays out their findings relative to the housing element. Exhibit B are the city's responses to the state's letter. What we've done is we've excerpted each of the findings in the state's letter in a shaded text box and then included some language beneath that each text box, which indicates how the city will change the element or edit the element in response, or to explain why the city included the wording that it did in each instance. Exhibit C are the proposed revisions to the October draft. This is a series of red line and strikeout attachments. They're numbered attachment 1 through attachment 6. That corresponds to the 6 chapters of the housing element. It's formatted that way really for the benefit of the state reviewers. And you'll notice in the attachment 1 through 6 that in the left-hand margin, there are, again, text boxes that indicate which specific state comments we're responding to in the specific revisions. We're trying to make this as easy as possible for the state reviewers to follow how we've edited the document in response to their specific comments. So having worked with them in the past, they appreciate this sort of key to following along how the city has responded to their comments. Finally, we've included Exhibit D, which are a series of letters that were received by the state, CC'd to the city. These are comments from various organizations and individuals on the housing element draft. So I've organized the comments, I've summarized them here, and I'm going to just again walk through about 7 or 8 of their major comments and talk a little bit about how we responded to each one. The first comment from the state is that the city should provide additional evidence that it had the capacity to meet its regional housing needs allocation, which is abbreviated RHNA, in 1999 to 2006. And again, for some context, I think the commission may recall at our prior meetings that the city did not have a certified housing element during this period under state law. If you didn't have the capacity to meet your need during that time, you have to carry forward the assignment that you didn't plan for during that time period. The city essentially is providing documentation in the housing element that it did have the capacity to accommodate its regional housing needs allocation during that time period. What the state has said is we would like additional evidence to that to reach that conclusion. What we have provided for the state is additional information on each of the sites that was available during that time period. In some cases, they're the same sites that we're looking at now as housing opportunity sites. We've done research on what was going on each of those sites during 1999 to 2006. In some cases, there were code enforcement issues. In other cases, there was a drive to move the business out of the neighborhood. In very few cases were there major investments in the property to sustain the existing businesses. So we are comfortable with the conclusion that these sites would have been optimal housing sites during that time period. We've also documented some of the other housing opportunities that existed in Albany during that time period, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide because we have that same comment came up about the current batch of slides. We'd like additional information demonstrating that these slides or that these sites are realistic and that the city can meet its regional housing needs allocation on these sites. So as I said, the second major comment was provide further evidence that the city can realistically meet its current regional housing needs allocation of about 276 units on the sites that have been included in the housing element. Again, to recap, we had included a series of sites that are zoned to permit at least 20 units per acre, which is what the state requires for sites that are considered eligible for low and very low income housing. And what they said is, well, are these the only sites in Albany where you can build at this density? And what we've said is no, actually, we've already done a filter to identify those sites that are most suitable, but certainly anything in the SPC, San Pablo Commercial or Solano Commercial, or R3 zone is eligible to be developed at multifamily densities, either in mixed use or as a multifamily building. There are 150 lots in the R3 zoning district, which allows up to 63 units per acre, that contain single-family homes, and any of those sites or aggregation of those sites could be a multifamily site. We've only counted those that we thought were the best candidates. We've also identified other sites in the, or acknowledged that there are other sites in the San Pablo commercial and Solano commercial zoning districts that currently are zoned to allow housing at densities up to 63 units per acre. This is not the case in many other cities. I mean, in many other cities that are facing this issue, they are actually having to rezone land to allow densities above 20 or 30 units to the acre. That's not the situation here. The zoning is in place. It's the development that hasn't been happening. What we've also done is to provide statistical data on development in the city during the last 13 years, and which is essentially going back to the beginning of the 1999 to 2006 period, and tried to make the case that these are, in fact, the sites where multifamily development will happen in the future, or the kinds of sites where multifamily development may happen. And I have a second slide in a moment that will provide more on that. We've added a no net loss program to the housing element, and what this does is it says that in the event that one of the housing sites develops with a non-residential use in the future, the city will make a finding that it still has adequate capacity to meet its regional housing need allocation. That was actually suggested to us by the state reviewer as a way of ensuring that the city had sufficient capacity. We've also added an additional housing site at 1107, 1111 San Pablo. These are two adjoining parcels. One is the restaurant at the corner of San Pablo and Dartmouth. If you've been by there lately, you maybe have noticed the large for sale sign in the window. The property is on the market right now for sale. It is adjacent to Max's Auto Repair at 1111, and if those two sites were aggregated, you'd have an 18,500 square foot parcel, which under zoning could accommodate 26 units. Based on the densities that we've been seeing on the corridor, it would be more likely to be 13 to 15 units on this site, but it certainly helps to identify additional potential housing sites for the housing element. I mentioned that we had documented we provided additional documentation about housing development in Albany looking back, and what we've found, and again included in the revised text, is that 67% of the housing units added in the period from 99 to 2012 were in mixed-use developments on the San Pablo corridor. This excludes UC Village reconstruction, and it excludes second units, but clearly that is where the development is happening in the city at this point in time. All of the sites that were developed were less than 1 acre, which addresses one of the comments that the sites are too small. Every new construction project on San Pablo Avenue since 1999 has included multifamily housing, except the Taco Bell, which was a like-for-like reconstruction. This doesn't include renovation of existing space, but in terms of actual new buildings since that time, they've all included housing as a component. They were all developed on sites where there were former businesses that were operational with FARs of less than 0.5. This is the same threshold that we used for the sites here. And about 10% of the corridor was developed during the last planning period. If you add up the total of all the sites that we've identified, it's about 15% of the corridor, so there's a margin if it's using that standard. Again, we've captured all of this in narrative text edits, and those have been submitted to the state as part of the edited document. They will be submitted to the state as part of the edited document in response to their comment. The next comment is that the city needed to provide additional demonstration that the CMX, which is the light industrial zone, has adequate capacity to meet emergency shelter needs. The commission will recall that at its, I think maybe October meeting, maybe it was December, it was the end of last year, there was a meeting where we talked about, it was in December, yeah, we talked about SB2 and the proposed change. There was a recommendation from the commission to expand that. Actually, last night, the council acted on that recommendation and included the San Pablo Commercial Zone, SPC zone, as a location where emergency shelter may be constructed by right. Which addresses state's concern that there were not sufficient opportunities in the CMX zone. So that comment has been responded to effectively. We did also add information on the CMX zone just in case. Comment 4 is to provide additional documentation of the multifamily permitting fees. In the last version of this, you saw a lot of information on single-family permitting fees, but we didn't have the equivalent information for multifamily, so that has been added. The state asked for additional information on the design review process in Albany. In many communities, design review can be a housing constraint. It adds to the cost of housing. It adds to the time required. What they were looking for is additional information on objective criteria that the city uses to evaluate projects. We pointed them to the design guidelines, both the residential design guidelines and the San Pablo Avenue design guidelines, as an indication that the city did have standards and didn't arbitrarily evaluate each development, that there was a consistent method of demonstrating that a project was consistent. Next, and this is probably the most important of their comments, is they wanted more proactive language on some of the policies, and particularly on the programs. I've listed some of those here. This isn't a list of every one of the programs, but we used a lot of words like consider or study or encourage, and they wanted more proactive verbs like adopt or amend or do these things as opposed to just studying them. What we've tried to do with an eye toward being realistic, given that we're getting, we're in the final year of the planning period, is make changes in response to their comments that are implementable. And so you see, whereas before the language was to consider minimum densities on San Pablo and Solano, this language now does commit the city to moving in that direction of minimum densities, to actually reducing fees for projects with affordable housing. The lot consolidation process, which was seen as important to creating larger, more developable sites, there's now additional language on what that is, including reduction of the lot merger fee that the city charges for lot consolidation. Allowing multifamily in the R4 zone. Again, these were things where the text previously said we would consider doing that. There's now a more committal language to doing that. There's also a discussion of relaxing the ground floor commercial requirement in the San Pablo commercial zone. That was something that was brought up by this commission as well as members of the public. That is now included in here. And then they wanted additional language on the parking policy issue. I think knowing that there might be a distant ballot measure to amend Measure D wasn't really enough. They wanted some more proactive discussion. So we did update the text to apprise the state of the city's active engagement of its citizens in the working committee that's been created to study ways to deal with Measure D and parking policy in general in the city by May of this year. The next comment was to demonstrate that the city reached out to all economic segments of the community. Most of these changes are in the first chapter of the document. We added additional information on who is on the city's email lists, who receives notification of meetings, who signed in at the town meeting and the previous workshop that was held in 2008, 2009. We also added text on the nature of public testimony that was received at those meetings, acknowledged that there is a community engagement working group that's been formed. There's a continuing dialogue on housing issues. We did do a walking tour of some of the key sites with nonprofit developers, housing advocates just last week. So there is progress and things are moving forward, and the city does continue its outreach efforts, so we've provided additional documentation of that in our responses. There was a request for a specific program on what happens if the housing element is amended to the other elements of the general plan, or what happens if the other elements of the general plan are amended in a way that might create an inconsistency with the housing element. So for example, if we change the land use element, take away a housing site, how would we assure internal consistency with the housing element? So there's policy, or actually program language that's been added. This is a government code requirement, so that's now included in the document. Those are the primary comments made in response to the state. There were also comments, or rather edits, that were made in response to public comment and correspondence. There was a request to update the status of 423, 427 Talbot. This is a project that came before the commission, was approved by the commission about 4 years ago, and we had included it as an approved project, but the approval has actually expired. The entitlements on that project have expired. So that now moves off of the committed projects list and into the potential available sites for the future list. So we've corrected that. We've included the expiration dates for the contracts on the existing affordable housing units in Albany. The Creekside apartments will not expire until 2057, and the Villa de Albany units have no expiration date. They are permanently affordable. There is updated information on what's happening at the Albany Bulb in the document, including the temporary shelter that's been put in place. A new program has been added to create an affordable housing fund. This would be a source of revenue from in lieu fees and from the boomerang funds that we may be getting back from the former redevelopment agency. And there's an expanded discussion of public education, the need for education and outreach on all housing issues, particularly those relating to emergency shelter and the need for affordable housing for low and very low income families and households. A clarification of what shared housing is, and then we're in the process of linking each of the programs to the specific policies that they implement. There was a comment that we have all our policies in one section and then all our programs. How do we know which programs are implementing which policies? So we're adding that linkage. In terms of the next steps, we are going to be submitting the proposed edits to the state very soon and working with the state to confirm that these edits are satisfactory and meet their expectations and their interpretation of the government code. We are also going to release an adoption draft of the document that has these changes included and an initial study and mitigated negative declaration, which is the CEQA document that's required since this is a general plan amendment. We will be bringing this back to the Planning Commission for a formal public hearing in February and then to the City Council in March, assuming that we get the green light from the state that we're moving in the right direction and that this is good to go. So we are looking for some indication from our reviewers at the state that the city has now complied with the government code with these edits included. Once this goes to the City Council, we would hope that it has a recommendation from the Planning Commission to adopt it. And at that point, we will begin work on the next housing element right away. But as I mentioned, we are going to come back to other general plan topics in there as well, because we do have 7 other elements to get through. And that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer questions or hear from the commission.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah, just a question of documentation. So there is a website, albany2035.org, and that's being used to publicize our ongoing general plan updates. And is it, do all the PowerPoints that you've done, have they gone onto this website? I couldn't find them, but maybe just afterwards I can ask staff to locate them for me. But the intention is that they will be there?
That is certainly the intention. I know we reorganized the website in December, and I thought that all the PowerPoints had been posted at that point as PDF files. If they haven't, we'll make sure that they are.
I'll ask staff afterwards to point me to them. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? We'll open it to the public for comment. If anyone's interested in coming forward and addressing this item, please hand in a speaker card to Anne.
We'll begin with the first 2 speakers, David Levin and Lauren Hansen.
Good evening. I'm David Levin. I'm a staff attorney, Bay Area Legal Aid. We're one of the organizations, along with Public Interest Law Project, that brought the housing element lawsuit because as of last October, Albany was the only jurisdiction out of more than 100 in the Bay Area that hadn't made a formal submission to the state of California. And we really want to express our appreciation for the efforts by the city and the work that's gone into this plan. In my comments, I just want to focus on public participation and point out how important it is, because it's an opportunity to educate people and build support for these efforts that are so important. At Bay Area Legal Aid, you know, we serve very low income and disabled people who desperately need this housing. So it is so important. And just want to point out a couple things where there may be some more room for improvement in public participation. You mentioned the notices that are provided, but it's not clear if there's always 72 hours notice provided for some of the submissions, or if more notice could be provided, that would allow more public participation and encourage more comments. Also, if you could specify what buildings information is posted in and where, that would help the public understand how the information is shared. There's an email, we understand email blasts are sent out, but some people have told us they've had trouble making sure they get all the emails. And if you could share a little more information on how people could join those lists or arrange to get that information, it could help assist people in signing up for it. And then you should take a look at also providing information in other languages to improve participation by people whose language is not, first language may not be English, or information on accessibility too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lauren Hansen, and I'm an attorney with the Public Interest Law Project, and I represent the petitioners and Albany Housing Advocates versus the City of Albany. First, I want to say that we do appreciate that the City Council agreed last night to permit emergency shelters by right in both the CMX and SPC zones. However, we do continue to agree with the Commission's recommendation on the December 11th meeting that the city amend its zoning code to also permit emergency shelters in the Solano commercial and R3 zones. Many people actually spoke at the city council meeting last night, and there were a lot of people who advocated that the city permit shelters by right in these zones. And that would be ideal because given the city's long history and lack of resources for homeless individuals and families, this would expand the opportunity to develop permanent shelters. At the very least, we encourage the commission to stick to its original recommendation, which is to permit shelters in the Solano commercial and R3 zones, subject to a conditional use permit. Finally, we want to address the revision in the housing element that a temporary shelter has been provided at the bulb. As we all know, that shelter is not a permanent structure. It doesn't provide basic amenities like kitchen facilities, cooking facilities, bathrooms. In fact, it literally provides 15 bunk beds or 30 beds for bulb residents who are being displaced. The need for homeless shelters is almost twice that. Furthermore, many of the bulb residents can't even use the shelter because the shelter isn't accessible for persons with disabilities. And furthermore, the city's denying reasonable accommodation requests for these individuals. The need for permanent emergency shelters and permanent affordable housing that is decent, safe, and sanitary is a critical and unmet need in this community. And permitting emergency shelters in multiple zones would be a step in the right direction to address these needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment for you, and it has to do with your December 3rd notes. Page 7, you kind of take the city to task here on table 4.3, Cornell Standage. There's a quarter acre sites. And this is where it gets into danger when, in your text, you're saying that realistically we can't get what the city says we can get on there. And I am concerned because I have a project in the city of Berkeley that's going through the process right now. It's less than a quarter acre, and I have 54 units on it. And you're saying we can't get 26 units on the site. So I think what I'm getting at is please be careful about throwing out numbers. because sometimes we can get more units on these than.
And that's good to hear. I mean, I think that we all agree in this room that we need to find creative approaches. It's been well documented by HCD that some of these smaller sites have more constraints to development, but I'm encouraged to hear that more units can be built on these.
Yeah, let's not go too negative too quickly.
Sure.
We can get more units on these sites than you. As designers, we're pretty creative about getting units on. In fact, unfortunately, the 54 was limited by the city. I could have gotten 72 on the site. So it's just that we can get density.
With what parking ratio?
Yeah, well, that's the case. That's the fallacy in itself, but the 54 was not a problem when working with the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next two speakers are Catherine Sutton and Robert Otis.
And then do we have any additional speakers after that?
I don't have any more
That's it.
speaker cards.
So if you're interested in speaking to this item, please fill out a card and bring it up to Ann.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Sutton, Albany resident. I had some questions. I'm looking at I'm not looking at the same numbers as you, but the place where they ask about analyzing the suitability and appropriateness of the CMX zone, are you taking into account pollution from this freeway? That was one question.
I'm sorry, what was that? Taking what into account for the freeway?
The pollution from the freeway.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I don't think, I don't know your name. Barry, thank you, mentioned anything about second units by right in R2. I'd like to know, what does that actually mean? I have a personal interest in that. Someone else has already mentioned the temporary shelter, which I think is a bit of a joke. I'm interested to know a little more about the Affordable Housing Fund. This walking tour, I had no idea it was happening, and we are a nonprofit agency that's very interested in this issue. So I question your ability to get out the word adequately. I don't know what the Community Engagement Working Group is, and I wonder whether you're referring to the Diverse Housing Working Group, but it might be nice if you called it by the right name. Thank you for the information about albany2035.org. I think those are the questions and comments I had. And I appreciate the huge amount of work that's gone into this. It's really hard to follow along. Can I get any answers now or not?
I'll tell you what, let's hear the comments from the last speaker,
Yeah.
and then maybe some of the answers can be rolled together.
Commission members and staff, I'm Bob Otis, an Albany resident. As a bit of a voice in the wilderness, I want to register my objection to what I regard as an incrementalist approach. We really need some zero-based planning, if I can borrow a phrase from budgeting. And we need it because of all the missteps that have occurred in the last 24 years in this town. I'd like to begin by reading from the argument in favor of Measure C. A vote for Measure C is not a vote for or against any particular plan for development. That was the beginning of the big lie. It also said that it simply adds an additional step to the city's regular planning processes. Yet, notwithstanding that assurance, we diverged into a voice division process that had nothing to do with the regular planning processes and was disruptive and destructive of good planning processes, and it should be disregarded. But let's go back and look at what the 1992 general plan said about the waterfront lands. The present commercial recreation uses are expected to continue for the duration of this plan. Therefore, this area does not present opportunities for housing development. Well, we've had an attempt by the current owner to move to Dixon. They engaged in what could only be regarded as an incredible Hail Mary process in attempting to attract the Lawrence Berkeley Lab to the waterfront lands. That property is very much available. I am sure it's simply that the city needs to devote its resources and its focus to making it work for housing. Wonderful things could be done there. Whoops, then I was going to talk about the Gill Tract. Oh, do I still have a minute? Okay, I think I do. There's no better place for an affordable housing project in Albany than the Gill Tract. And let's note that the UC Village planning process is far from over. The proverbial large opera singer has not yet sung on that subject. And the project that has been tentatively approved is misguided in that it should have included multiple stories of residential structures above the Sprouts store, just like the TJ project in downtown Berkeley, which I lived in for 2 years, in 2010 to 2012, which has affordable housing units in it. And it was really nice to see some of those little kids with their probably single mothers going up and down the elevators in that very nice building. There is busing to and from UC Berkeley. It would be possible for students living there. Anyway, I see I'm out of time, but the Gill Tract is where it's at, and the focus on agriculture is misplaced. It's about housing. And we can do a little urban farm there if we have to make that work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, might I say one other thing? Oh, that's all right. I'll do it another time.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Carol O'Keefe.
Hi, I'm Carol O'Keefe. I'm an Albany resident. I just have 2 points, and they're actually more along the lines of questions than suggestions. Although I should begin with a thank you for all the work that has been done. It's really amazing to see all of the ideas that are beginning to percolate through all of these materials. But the first point is I see that there have been some ideas about increasing the probability of gaining more secondary units, which I think might be one of the best ways Albany could count sooner on additional lower income housing. I'm curious to see if you all can come up with anything else that would be an incentive to homeowners to create secondary units that were affordable to low or very low income individuals. I alone know of 2 people with structures on their property that might lend themselves to that. And I wonder how many more there are in Albany. I think there's only 4 anticipated of those secondary units in either the current or the upcoming estimates. But it seems to me that that's an area where we might be able to get some real additional housing if we could figure out ways to really incent the property owners. The second is definitely a question. Reading through all of the things that have been identified and work that will be done, where is Albany going to have the staff to do all of this? I would like some discussion about the workload requirements and how those can be accommodated. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no more cards.
Okay, we'll bring it back to Barry Miller to respond.
Thank you, Chair Eisenman. I'll respond first to Catherine's questions, and I may ask Jeff to chime in on 1 or 2 of these. The issue of pollution from the freeway in the CMX, there is an environmental document that's going to be done as part of the housing elements and initial study and negative declaration that's going to look at what effect these policies would have on the environment and what effect the environment would have on the policies as well. So we did take into consideration a number of constraints in the CMX zone. I think the issue may be mitigated a little bit by the fact that we've now opened up the SPC zone as a potential location for emergency shelter, so there's not a necessity to locate a shelter in the CMX since the opportunity would also exist along San Pablo Avenue under the ordinance change approved by the council last night. Second units, permitting them by right in the R2 zone. So right now, you actually can't build a second unit if you're in the R2 or R3 zone. It's not considered a permitted use. And the element initially proposed changing the zoning code to allow second units in both R2 and R3. We've backed off from that a little and just said R2 would be an acceptable location. R2 is the, it's the sort of medium density zone. You find a lot of duplexes and triplexes, some single-family homes in that zoning district. The idea of allowing it in R3 or not allowing it in R3, that's the higher density, the highest density, the multifamily zone. Initially, we had proposed that they be allowed in that zone as well, but there was some concern that if we did that, those sites that could be used for apartments or more larger multifamily projects would be compromised. So we're still including a prohibition in R3, but that's where that came from. The Affordable Housing Fund, again, this was an idea that came from the public at prior meetings to create a dedicated funding source or funding stream that was for primarily programs and housing units for very low and extremely low income households. And that would be a repository for any funds that the city collects through its in lieu housing fee for inclusionary units or redevelopment. We're calling the boomerang funds, any money the city will get back from what was taken away after the redevelopment agency was dissolved that had been earmarked for affordable housing. It's a start. It's at least creating a dedicated place where money for affordable housing can begin to build up. And as programs are implemented in the future, the hope is that that fund will grow and additional sources and means of generating money for that fund would start to be created. I'm going to let Jeff address the walking tour. And then on the community engagement working group, that is, I think, the same group that you're referring to. So if we have the name wrong, we'll correct it.
As the commission knows, litigation has been filed against the city with respect to our housing element. And as a normal part of any litigation, the city engages with the plaintiffs' legal counsel and to explore the potential of a settlement. In the context of settlement discussions, to help facilitate those discussions, the parties agreed that it would be worthwhile to organize a walking tour of a few sites with housing experts. We have done that. It is because it's in the context of a settlement conference. It's confidential at this point, at least. And but we did do that with representatives of the plaintiffs and with city staff and the city attorney. So I'm afraid I can't go into any details with you this evening, but it was, I think, informative and worthwhile, and we'll hopefully be able to do a similar kind of function at some point. That would be, somehow a more public event.
I also wanted to respond to Carol's comments on second units and staff. I may turn it back to you on staffing, but the second unit, I think I've brought up before what the city of Piedmont does, and I think it's a good model to possibly emulate here, which is to have set market rate second units, which any property owner can come in and propose, and then a separate category of rent restricted second units, which are really available to property owners who can't meet the standards to provide a traditional second unit. In that city, you're permitted to provide a second unit with no parking, no off-street parking, provided that you sign a deed restriction that rent restricts the unit and limits occupancy to a very low-income household. And they've actually created about 10 units in the last 7 years. So it's not a huge number, but in a relatively small city, it's a start. And it does create a pool of affordable units in a city that might otherwise be cash-strapped or unable to provide those units where there's only small sites, or in their case, almost no sites. So I think it's something that we would definitely look into, here in Albany. It's definitely got some transferability. Oh, the staffing question, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take that one again. We have a new city manager, Penelope Leach, and one of the things that Penelope has asked our department and every department to do is, over the next couple of months, is to kind of visualize what would you really like to have in terms of an organizational support in staff and consultants and other resources. And I'm working on that for the Community Development Department. And as part of that, there absolutely will be a long-term vision for a city staff person who is experienced in affordable housing and has time allocated to help facilitate affordable housing. When exactly that vision will be fulfilled, I hope sooner than later, because we have a lot of work to do that we have to do right away in the draft element, and I suspect that the momentum will just keep up once we transition into the upcoming element in the 2015 through 2023. So I do hope that we will have staffing. It certainly will be a city council decision how they decide between affordable housing and environmental objectives and a bunch of other things as well. But that will all be part of the normal budgeting process that occurs in May and June.
I had a follow-up question about why are second units not being included in the numbers?
So we've included 4 second units in the number, as one of the speakers mentioned. The original number was 40, but that was when the element was submitted in 2009, and there were 5 years left in the planning period. We didn't think we could, in good faith, go into the state and say we're going to build 40 second units in 2014 in the city of Albany. So we reduced that number to something that's much more doable in the time period that's available. I think looking at the next planning period, which is 8 years, that 4 units, we hope, will go up to something more like 30 or 40 again. The city in the past has created, in some years, 3 or 4 second units, so that's a realistic number. But I don't think it's ever produced 40 second units in a year. So that's the reason that number is in there.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? We'll tell you what, we'll bring it back to the commission for comment. Who would like to begin?
I'll dive in. You're looking at me. I have a number of comments and questions based on the responses. And I, too, appreciate the effort that's gone into this, and I want to acknowledge that, members of the public have contributed both in the questions and the answers and to the process as a whole. Curious, there was a mention on the top of page 2 of citizen-led petition and another property with blight and graffiti. Which are those? Curious. Don't recall that.
In 2000, there was a citizen petition to shut down the car wash because of noise, and there were 44 people who signed it on adjacent properties. It was in the file for the property.
Okay.
The blight issue was with Goodyear, and there were a number of complaints that were in the file from the mid-1990s about litter and graffiti and blight, poor condition on that property.
Okay, I was just curious. Also on page 2, in the next item about capacity, it could be worth making mention of the fact that our commercial zoning floor area ratio on San Pablo corridor is 0.95, but for mixed use, it's 2.25, and that alone is an incentive to see housing looking at a development. I wanted to mention that as a possible add. On page 3, it mentions no new housing on the Solano Avenue corridor, and I do know there was the new building on Solano between Keynes and Stanage, and I don't know if they added housing units or if that was just a net, no loss, no gain, but there was one building I know of that was built. Page 5. You answered that question. I'm pleased to hear that the City Council agreed with our recommendation to add the San Pablo zone as a by right district. On page 7, consolidation, I think that incentivizing consolidation is one thing that we need to focus on, but I have to ask if we shouldn't also be looking for ways to make smaller parcels developable, because that is the majority of the properties out there, and they become available, on on an individual basis, and, sometimes the adjacent properties just aren't for sale and aren't going to be for sale. So I'm asking a broader question to the whole commission. Are there ways that we can make it easier to develop those smaller parcels? Allowing, well, I guess this would be through a Measure D reform, some sort of reduced parking ratio, higher density than the current ramp down for smaller lots, or possibly even acknowledging that with a smaller scale of development that maybe reduced daylight planes are appropriate, because there will be smaller buildings and more daylight between them. Let's see. On page 7, we discussed the prohibition on second units, and my only question there in the R3 district is that, given that it's a multifamily zone, could one propose a development of another unit to create a multifamily site and just not call it a second unit and end up with, a distinction without a difference? The zoning allows it, is I guess what I'm saying.
So are you thinking that we should consider adding second units in R2 because of the technicality of what you're?
Well, I think we are proposing to allow it as a by right on R2. I think what I'm saying is, even if we don't have it as a by right on an R3,
I'm sorry, I meant
it's
R3.
not prohibited because our zoning allows multiple units on those sites. Just noting when we're discussing parking as a possible constraint, that, our floor area ratios do not count subterranean parking. So it can be built, albeit it's more costly to do so. So maybe, that would be one way we could look at that, is how we look at parking relative to the floor area ratio. Those are my ideas and questions.
Thank you.
Well, I actually have a quick one. You covered a lot of what I wanted to cover. But stepping back to this R3 zone issue, where does this butt against the state law of allowing inclusionary units, or not inclusionary, secondary residential units? I know does state law come in and trump some of our requirements in the R2 and R3 on that? Because I believe there's rights in the state law to develop them.
That's an excellent question. I do not know the answer to that right now, but we can certainly look into that.
Ann is, right.
I do too, but I'm not going to say it. But I think it needs to be included, the discussion on that in the housing element, because I think we're butting up against.
We can come back to that as Ann's
Yeah.
fishing through the government code to get to that information for you.
Uh-oh, staff's reading.
Okay.
Yeah, she needs a little bit more time to find.
Ann's researching. With any further comments?
I have no comments at this time.
Okay. Sorry, I just lost where I was. I don't know, I feel like in Albany, and I've said this before, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it seems to me that the model for affordable housing is really second units, and that I feel strongly that we should make a push to include those moving forward, because it seems not as realistic for large developers to come in and produce affordable housing in a cost-effective way in Albany, because the real estate values are so high. And so it seems to me that it's the families that are invested here in Albany who have already put money into their own homes that would be willing to have a second unit, or they could take some of their money out and build a second unit on their own property. That seems like a good model for Albany, and so it it seems that we should be aggressively pursuing that in the future. So how does this roll into the next housing element then? So this is going to be a springboard, and so what I want to do is consider the second units in the next housing element, and is there some way that we need to include that more here, or can we bring that back?
In general, what we've been doing with all the commission feedback and public feedback is trying to distinguish things that can go forward immediately and can be implemented this year, and things that may require 2015, 2016 for implementation. I think that, and we've even broken down the second unit action in the housing element so that it will start now to make some initial changes, but probably beyond 2014, there are going to be more changes along the lines of what you're suggesting. So I think we're trying to nuance some of the input from the commission and public based on limited staffing and some of the constraints. But you will see, once we get to the adopted element, a lot more opportunity and places where we can include more proactive language on second units as an affordable housing resource.
Thank you.
I had one more quick question. This will buy staff a little more time. On page 10, it makes mention of a community meeting on housing on January 28th. And what are the details of that, please?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to pipe up about that. This is it's a group of people who've gotten together referring to themselves as the Diverse Housing Working Group. It came about after a work session that Ann and Barry had, a little bit more informal than commission meetings that we had in October. And some members of the community thought that was a good start and wanted to be able to continue to have those discussions. And so we're assisting in, and a lot of people are assisting. It's not necessarily a city staff-led effort, but we're engaged in it. And there is a community-wide meeting scheduled for Thursday, January 28th at St. Albans Church. Tuesday, thank you. Tuesday, January 28th at 7? St. Albans, 7:15. Thank you.
What was that again? 7:15?
7:15, right? That would be.
Well, what's really sad is I'm supposed to be on that committee.
So it's just it's another way to have a community dialogue about something that's not necessarily a formal city meeting.
I'm sorry, I had one other question, so if I may. There was a comment about relaxing the ground floor requirements in the San Pablo commercial for commercial purposes, and I was surprised by that comment. I don't remember that dialogue, and I was wondering if you would remind me what was discussed. Maybe I missed that meeting.
Currently, it's not permitted to use the ground floor for residential uses except for access into the residential part of the building. And it may have been more from public comment than from, but I think the commission, at least some of the commissioners may have brought it up as an area where the city might take another look at that requirement and allow ground floor residential on San Pablo Avenue, possibly with a use permit, possibly by right, possibly only on certain parts of the avenue, for example, maybe not at the node where San Pablo and Solano cross. It's just an idea that I think is starting to percolate, that we have said is something that we'll begin to flesh out. It's also a general plan related issue because it gets to the character of the avenue. So it's something that we're going to continue to look at. That said, what we've opened the door to in the element is that if a project comes in with affordable housing and applies for a density bonus, the city can can grant concessions from development standards, and that could be a concession to say you don't have to meet the ground floor retail requirement. You can do residential on the ground floor if you build a 100% affordable housing or a project that meets the density bonus standard. So I think we're stepping in that direction without jumping all the way there at this point.
I'm glad you brought that one up, actually, because I'm in favor of moving in that direction. It seemed like moving in the direction of allowing housing on the ground floor with the use permit would give us the flexibility to implement that where it made sense. So that'd be something I'd be in favor of.
To counter that, I'm opposed to it.
Yeah.
So,
We've
because,
had,
for the reasons we've discussed at length here, but I have two statements sorry, knowing that our state officials probably listen to us every meeting religiously, I'd like to offer this. That the state look at some type of property tax break on inclusionary housing units, and the state look at the taxable income be reduced on these units for landlords. And that would give them a little bit more incentives to be able to offset some of the value they're not getting out of renting it at full market rate. So I think both of those could be, but both of them have to be through the state. But I think both of them could stimulate inclusionary housing in the state of California. So.
good point.
Hear that, guys? Out there? So, yeah, those are 2 points I think I just wanted to make, and hopefully we can move with those on a higher level, higher plane.
I think the conversation on the commercial at ground floor is going to be a good debate to watch, because I think there's a lot to discuss there. So anyway, well, thank you. Any other comments?
The answer is?
The answer is, we actually would prefer to discuss this with the city attorney or providing an answer to the full commission.
Okay.
Fair enough.
As a study session, we'll bring that back to you, so before you make a recommendation to council, you're fully informed on the second units.
Okay.
There are, by the way, there are other cities that prohibit second units in other zones, but I don't know if, it's the same question of those cities. So it's certainly not something that's unique to Albany, but whether we'll come back with an answer for you on that.
Thank you.
And counties.
Okay, we'll move on to item 5, consent calendar.
Before you go into the consent calendar, there is a typo on item 5C. It should be the meeting minutes for October 9th, not October 2nd, so we're going to bump that to the next agenda. Otherwise, the other 3 sets of meeting minutes are ready for action.
So we're removing item C from the
Item
consent
C.
calendar. Is there interest in pulling any additional items? It was noted that item E did not have a front elevation.
I think we're going to want to pull that and discuss it.
So
It has one.
I'm sorry?
It does have one.
Well, it has one that's, yeah, okay.
I
So
think it needs to be discussed.
let's pull item E for discussion. So we're going to be voting on items 5A, B, and D.
I'll move approval of consent calendar items 5A, 5B, and 5D only.
All those in favor? Oh, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain because I did not see the minutes.
Okay, motion carries, passes. So let's move on to 5E, and
I just want to clarify, the meeting minutes were attached to the email that was sent with the packet. I just want to make sure.
I must have overlooked that then, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
okay. So may we have a little bit of the staff report for item 5E?
Yes. Before you is a design review application for a second-story addition at 1016 Pomona. The addition is proposed to be located at the rear of the home. The existing house is 840 square feet, 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The lot is 4,200 square feet. The addition will include a first-floor family room and then a second-story master suite directly above that. Altogether, the new building area is 696 square feet, with 348 square feet on each level. The existing building height is 13 feet 3 inches. The new building height will be 21 feet 8 inches. The house is Spanish eclectic in appearance, and the addition has been designed to maintain some of that character. The applicant is here this evening. If
Okay.
we can pull the plans up on the computer as well.
So are we correct that the final build-out results in a floor area ratio of 0.30?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and parking is provided in the adjacent driveway.
Are there any questions for staff?
I apologize, I don't remember the staff report offhand, but the outbuilding, what's in the outbuilding, do we know?
I believe it's, if memory serves me correctly, it was built in 1994, and it's a combination garage storage area with a workshop, but I may let the applicant come up and confirm that. That's what our records indicated as far as what was approved in 1994.
And the square footage, the additional square footage, and that was included in the floor area ratio?
Yes.
Okay. Would you come forward and present your project, please?
The existing house is a 2-in-1, and this is a family, a couple with 2 kids, and they need another bedroom and a family room and a master bathroom for privacy for the adults. The outbuilding is finished. It is vacant. It is just like office space or studio space. It doesn't have any garage doors. It's got sliding double doors on it. So it would qualify as an office or a studio or something of that nature.
Would you please introduce yourself and tell us?
Oh, my name is Don Waters. I'm a local contractor in Albany.
Thank you. Great. And you prepared the drawings?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Waters?
So it was stated that there was no front elevation, but then you said there is a front elevation.
They caught that before I turned the drawings in, and I put it on the last page, and I did it with the street context drawing with the addition, and I did it to scale. I measured off the drawings, and I got, within a couple of inches the correct scale, and it's just really a blank wall that you're never going to be able to see because of the trees.
Oh, first, okay, when I first looked at it, I thought those were story poles, but that is the elevation.
And that's all there is to it.
Okay.
And because of the trees on the street, you can't see anything from the street, and when you're on the sidewalk and you look back, the front of the building is quite long, and you don't actually ever see the addition.
Okay, all right. That makes sense. Yeah, I was confused because on the drawing here, it looks like you would see it, but you're saying that you wouldn't.
Yeah, in order to do the elevation, I had to erase the trees, so I did, and I put it in as if the trees weren't there. But if you look at the site context drawing on page 1 or 2, you can see that the street is heavily wooded with mature trees, and you're never going to be able to see it.
Well, trees do come down.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell you what, why don't we invite anyone in the community to come up and speak about this item, and
Sure.
And we may bring you back up for questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone interested in addressing the commission on this item? Seeing none, let's open the discussion with the commission. I have a few comments. Who else would like to speak?
Well,
Sure.
Mr. Pilch.
But I don't need to go first.
well, I guess I'm pretty much,
Go ahead.
would like to see on that blank front wall some type of relief or articulation or something. I mean, it is, as you say, there's a tree in front of it from the street, but then people do walk down the street. They won't be able to directly see it from the front of the house, but they will be able to see it from the sides. They'll be able to see it from other jurisdictions. Sure they would. I mean, I can probably see it from my house. So I think that something could be done there that would offer some type of design to help with the blank wall look. There is a possibility, I mean, there is a stair there. You could put a window in the stair.
Yeah, I have no problem.
So, I do apologize. I don't think I've ever seen anybody in the whole time I've been doing this have a blank wall facing the street
Facing
on a
the street.
residential project. Now, I don't blame you because I have a problem with the trash people showing up before they're supposed to every Friday, every Monday, every Tuesday. And so I was thinking that, again, the thought that having bedrooms facing the street is not a good idea. So the blank wall, I think is to me, I think it's probably okay, but there needs to be something more than just a blank wall. Something needs to be, you'll get your chance, something needs to be broken up. And that's, I think, can be done quite nicely.
Yeah, I have to agree with Phil. I was a little surprised to see no windows on that east elevation, given that, you know, from a lot of our Albany homes in the flats, our nicest views are up towards the hills. Granted, you're also looking at your own roof. But I did question the statement that you won't be able to see that facade from the street. So I went down there and I took some photos, and actually you can see the story poles and that east facade pretty darn well from the sidewalk across the street. So I agree with Phil that a window maybe over the toilet or into the tub area or into the stairwell. And actually the south side is pretty well hidden, but it's that northern edge down the driveway that you do get quite a bit of view. And if you drive around town and look at homes that were approved in years past that have no windows on this, you know, rear two-story addition, which is a very popular and economical way to add on in Albany, you see them and they don't look so great. So I think some relief of that blank wall, and again, even a single window would make a big difference in my mind.
I entirely agree, and I think you could add windows in the well and a small one over the toilet. There's also a language of arches on the front of the house, and there could be a relief with an arch that matches the one over the window or the one into the porch, and I actually think that will add to the character, to the Spanish impression. There could be Spanish tile. There's a lot that could be done, and I think that the owners will benefit from having a house with a little bit more character as well. It would be more enjoyable to come home to a house that didn't have a big flat facade.
Yeah, I do want to reiterate that, you know, this is a very modest addition to a modest home. We're at a 0.3 floor area ratio where 0.55 is the maximum. So my inclination would be to approve this evening with staff review of the modifications, you know, to the east facade, and if there are concerns, that they could choose to run those by us.
Okay.
I would support that.
I'm amenable to that, but I just want to put in my 2 cents, which is that I agree with my fellow commissioners' comments, and that I would even like to see, I would prefer to see 2 windows there, one over the stairwell and one in the bathroom, and the owners will benefit from more light inside that addition as well. So yeah, I can concur.
You know, to summarize my comments, I think that to mimic the window down below with just a recess or a pop finish out. One of the items, and I know you would pick this up when you were building this, but in the master bathroom, you might want to flip that door so it doesn't open up against the counter. That's kind of a real, you would pick it up and it would go, why didn't you open it up against the closet instead of the counter? Because you'd have to walk around the counter you'd have to walk around the door to get to the counter, and that door is going to remain open 90% of the time. So anyway, that was just a small thing, but I would think that, you know, adding some relief would make a great difference. And then to change the colors, the paint colors in it, it'll pop it off to a real nice finish. That's a minor issue.
There's little tricks you can, if you want to creative leaf, one portion of the wall is in 2x6s and the other's in 2x4s, and you get an instant 2-inch relief. There's all kinds of ways to trick that out. I was looking at the lower floor plan and wanting to give them more storage and thinking that they could go to an instant hot water heater and gain a whole closet down there, but those are just thoughts. Are there any other comments? If not, Commissioner Arkin, would you like to make a movement?
Sure, I'll do that.
But wait, before you do, I'm sorry. Do we want, if you look at this, the lower floor has this nice little cornice edge. I mean, it's just an articulated, gently cornice area. Do we want to do that on the upper story also, or do we just want to create a frame?
We could flip-flop it. You could have this here and that there.
Something.
Yeah.
You know what, the cornice on the second floor, I think, could use a little work also.
The tile edge, you mean?
It could be a tile, it could be just a articulation like you see on all these houses. It's, and unfortunately, or fortunately, most of these come into us with a straight line, and then you'll see them, these little things added on, and it's pretty straightforward and simple to do. It looks really nice.
So we're describing the arced relief that's over the window, that somewhat matches the arch in the doorway to the porch, and that relief, those arches could be repeated on the back wall. You could flip-flop you could recreate the shape that's over the windows diagonally to the right, behind, and take the tile and go diagonally to the left. You could flip-flop those and make a alternate relief. I think there's a lot of options here, and I realize that those are adding to the cost of the construction, but I also think it's going to add to the value of the home because it will have, and I hate this word, but more curb appeal. It just will have more charm and character, and as I said, they'll enjoy coming home to it.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with some of that. You know, I think the back part of the house, and this is, you know, all the way at the back, while it is visible at the street, is, you know, once you move down the driveway, things get a little simpler. And I think what I'm really uncomfortable with is just the blank facade, but I don't see a need to go so far as to recreate the front facade on that upper story. Just a little bit of relief in the form of a couple windows would do it. And again, I think I'm comfortable letting staff review it when it comes in for a building permit application. So, you know, I think the applicants have heard all of our ideas. They can choose among them and you know, go forward.
Are there any other comments?
So I guess my question is, would you be comfortable with a more open-ended approval as opposed to something that specifies thou shalt?
I would. I was throwing out suggestions, so if it grabbed them that they wanted to continue and go a little bit further with the design, there are additional options that they could consider, but yes, I would be willing to leave it open to staff.
I would, I like your idea if the building was closer to the street and breaking up that mass. But because it's so far back, and this is kind of, I'm going against my nature here of going against that idea, because I do like second stories broken up. I just don't like solid walls, and roof lines especially, but I think in this case, it's so far back from the street.
Well, you see it. Look,
Yeah.
you will see it from the sidewalk.
Yeah. I mean, I would support you doing it, but I don't think I would.
I'm not making it a
Yeah.
requirement.
I think it's a great idea. I think, I hope that the applicant looks into it.
Can we say, I would say that the project would be improved by the addition of both the windows and the treatment that the chair is describing.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. Okay. You want to move approval?
Sure, I'll make a motion, and we'll see what happens. I'll move approval of planning application 13-085 at 1016 Pomona Avenue for a second-story addition. Approving the application is submitted with the addition of some further articulation of the east facade in the form of additional windows and possible other treatment based on commission discussion, subject to staff review and approval. And this motion incorporates all of the conditions outlined in the staff report.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, pending a 14-day appeal period. Tell you what, would you please come to the microphone so we can hear you?
Just to address all of you and to do it, 2 windows, bracketing both sides, redwood brackets, and a slightly arched lattice that I can get out of a 2x12 and cut the lattice in and leaving it exposed. I've used this element before and it lasts a long time. And this is the top of the building, which will be most visible, just a 2-foot redwood lattice with going across it with some windows bracketed in it. Would that make most of you happy?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay. Given that, then
Thank you.
very much.
Thanks. Good luck.
Okay. Moving on to item 6, this is an opportunity for anyone in the public to address the commission on items that are not already on the agenda tonight. Seeing none, we're going to move on to item 7A, amendment to the Planning and Zoning Code related to sign regulations to allow digital billboards in the commercial mixed-use zoning district. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you very much. The item before you is to review and make a recommendation to the City Council on amendment to the Planning and Zoning Code to allow digital billboards in Albany. The context for this request comes out of the city's need to develop a public works service center. Right now, we lease a facility on Cleveland Avenue next to 540 Cleveland, 544 Cleveland. The city is in contract to purchase the property at 540 Cleveland. Today, it's a vacant lot. It was the site of Western Forge and Flange for many years. As part of the city's analysis of the feasibility of the project, we're basically scrambling to come up with different sources of funds to help make this a feasible project. And while we will, by developing our own site, we won't have to pay rent to a landlord, which we do now, we do need to additional revenue sources to be able to implement the project without impacting existing programs. So as part of that, we've explored the feasibility of leasing a small, basically a corner of the property to a digital billboard provider. These are lucrative, and attached to your staff report is a staff report was prepared to the City Council some time ago. And the revenue from something like this is a six-figure dollar figure for the city if we were able to do this. In order to do it, we would need to amend the zoning ordinance. The commission discussed this in October and November, and I think you expressed some hesitation about this and some concerns that completely understandable that this is maybe not quite in character with the city of Albany and kind of what we envision about Albany. Nonetheless, I've been asked to carry forward with an amendment to the City Council. And the way we've drafted the proposed ordinance is to really focus the provisions of the ordinance to allow a digital billboard only in the situation where we negotiate agreement with a billboard operator to remove a corresponding agreed upon number of billboards that are currently in the city. Right now, Clear Channel has 2 billboards on the roof of Montero's. Today, there's nothing on that billboard. There's no advertisement of any nature, and they're quite old and in deteriorated condition. So as part of a comprehensive agreement with Clear Channel, we could negotiate both to receive the revenues to support the construction of the Public Works Service Center and to remove the blight at Solano and San Pablo. We've reviewed ordinances from a variety of cities, San Diego, Glendale, Colfax, and Oceanside in particular, and we have talked with the Clear Channel representatives as well to understand the business needs from their perspective. The provisions that have been drafted make reference to, among other things, making sure that the installation complies with state and federal highway regulations, that there would be technology embedded in the installation to adjust the brightness for light conditions, so it would be brighter during the day, and then would dim during the evening when you don't need quite the glare to read the sign. We'd also ask that the energy efficiency technologies be incorporated into the application. Again, this is a project that it seems like we have a lot of these, but there's some degree of urgency to move forward with the changes to bring that to the City Council to have their consideration of this proposal, and so that we can then enter into negotiations with Clear Channel, and from there we can complete the planning process and design process for the new facility. And incidentally, for the new facility, that facility will go through design review. You'll see that, and it will go through our normal process, including a CEQA review. So we'll take a little bit more careful look at exactly where the placement of this sign would be and give you photo simulations of its impact. We're sensitive to the fact that people live in the high-rises over on Pierce, and so the idea would be it would be oriented towards Interstate 580 and angled so that residents in the high-rises would see the structure, but the signs themselves wouldn't be facing the residences around Pierce Street. So again, we're asking for you to take an action on a recommendation of the City Council, and fully appreciate that this is acknowledge that we heard you loud and clear earlier about some of your concerns about this, but nonetheless, I need to get it to the City Council pretty soon. Be happy to take any questions.
Questions for staff?
No questions.
None.
I'm sorry, and I know you said this, the timeline, so we're giving you recommendations today, and then this will be revised and taken to the City Council?
That's right. It will probably go to the City Council at their February 18th. Am I getting that right? It's the day after President's Day. There'll be a City Council meeting. Our target right now would be, unless something comes out of this discussion, our target would be to bring it to the City Council on February 18th for their consideration.
Actually, I did think of a question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Chair, did the Clear Channel representatives give you any idea of the power consumption of the billboards?
I don't know off the top of my head. There is a representative here. I'm not sure if he wants to speak to that. But what we would do as these technologies evolve and you know, what they use today is probably going to be more than what they'll be using in a couple of years. When the application comes in, we'd basically at staff level do some research to make sure they're using whatever is the best technology. And also to the degree that we have our energy providers, electricity providers such as PG&E, if they have some green electricity options, we would encourage them to use those as well, so that while it is obviously going to consume electricity, it hopefully is on the leading edge of these kinds of installations.
Have they given you any indication that they employ PV panels at any of their digital billboards to offset the electricity?
I don't know. I don't know any details of that, but we can certainly explore that with them, and if it's at all feasible, we'll ask them to do that as well.
Should we be concerned how fast this is going?
You know, frankly, I think you'll have plenty of time with this project ultimately. Okay. You're going to see the actual application itself, when it comes in, both for the building and for the billboard. And there'll be a environmental review. So the details, you're not missing out on anything there. There'll be plenty of opportunities, there'll be plenty of public input. In terms of the policy decision, there is some urgency to get it to the next level. We do have a lease with our current landlord that expires in 2015, so we want to try to get this project, we probably won't have the project finished by the time the lease expires, so we'll have to negotiate an extension, but we want to get it done as quickly as possible.
Meaning having it installed by 2015?
Having the whole service center constructed, including the installation of this.
Okay.
Yeah, so this would go in as quickly as it would fit into the phasing of construction. You know, we get electricity out there. It might even be up before the service center itself is operational.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I'll tell you what, let's open it up for the public to comment. Are there any speakers to the digital billboards? Okay, we'll close it and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I have some comments. At the previous meeting, I did join the chorus of, well, it's probably too strongly stated, but joined some of my fellow commissioners in poo-pooing this idea a bit. I think that if I had my druthers, there would be no billboards. I do think they are not attractive in general, and in places, in communities that don't allow billboards, I think you have the community looks much nicer. That said, I think we're in an area that does have a lot of billboards, and we are surrounded by them on both sides and all sides. For that reason, I can't be too opposed to our bringing billboards or our allowing digital billboards. When digital billboards first came out, they were quite bad. Some of the first ones did not dim at night, so they were much too bright and were quite a distraction to drivers. Then the notion of dimming them at night to match the ambient light came about, and that improved the quality. And lately, on my commute to my new job, I've noticed some billboards that I actually couldn't tell first were digital billboards. The technology has gotten good enough so that the quality is good enough that it looked like a print advertisement, and the lighting matched the ambient lighting so well that it just blended right in. I mean, in that it looked like a print billboard and not a digital billboard. So I think that the technology has come far that that it being digital does not necessarily make it worse than a print billboard. Plus the additional constraints that the advertisement not have animation and that only change every 8 seconds goes towards making sure that it won't be a distraction to drivers as well. So I find myself, due to the fact that this could bring significant revenue to the city, I find myself in favor of this change. My biggest opposition now is the electricity use and the addition of the greenhouse gases. So greenhouse gas emissions due to that. So what I would be looking for is for staff to bring up in their negotiations the use of PV panels and at the very least the use of green electricity to power these billboards. So that would allay my concerns in terms of the electricity consumption. Otherwise, I think I'd be okay with approving this change so that we could have digital billboards at this site.
I'm trying to think I have anything to add to that. I don't think I do. Other than actually, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but maybe we should get some digital billboards down at Montero's and get rid of those ugly little stagnant ones. If we could have a little Times Square down there.
We'll see that with a full-on node proposal.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. We'll make that a destination corner yet. No, I would be very thrilled to, I think it's a good exchange where we get rid of those 2 billboards in exchange for this facing a freeway as opposed to right in the middle of our town. So I think I would be in favor of that proposal, or the ordinance.
Yeah, I want to note that we did receive at least one note of correspondence from someone who was against them, and I will admit to being initially against them as well, but then, I was recalling that we took action a few years ago to not allow vinyl siding as an exterior building material, in part due to the environmental impacts of the manufacture of PVC, polyvinyl chloride. And I think, when we start to look at environmental trade-offs, even though I couldn't find any real data on the impact of replacing vinyl billboards versus, the energy used in the digital, I'm comfortable with that trade-off. So I've sort of come 180 degrees on that. And I agree with a lot of the comments that Commissioner Pilch made. I did some research and calculations on what the actual energy use is for our December 11th hearing, and all of my notes are with my December 11th hearing notes. But I do recall that an area where we have a triangular configuration of these, and assuming that it's close to an equilateral triangle, an area of photovoltaics that's somewhere in the range of 6 to 10 feet larger than that triangle created by 60-foot long billboards is enough power to net out a zero energy or generate enough electricity to power such a billboard. It may even be able to use less electricity if the surfaces are being shaded, and a further benefit would be that cantilever would make the surface less visible from the taller buildings on the other side of the freeway. I think it's worth noting as well that I-80 is designated as a visual corridor, so no billboards other than the sign for Golden Gate Fields, which is not a billboard, it's a business sign, are allowed along that stretch. This is facing Highway 580.
But Far East has one, and CBS Outdoor has one.
They may be beyond the visual corridor. I don't know.
I'm not sure about the CBS one in Berkeley is across East Shore Highway, so it doesn't. I think there's some technical difference between one that's immediately adjacent to the roadway and one that's 80 feet or whatever further east from the edge.
On the frontage road.
On the frontage road, yeah, the one
highway.
between Gilman and University.
So you could put one on your house, Phil.
I'm thinking. that and a phone, cell tower.
In any event, I appreciate that there is language encouraging the operator to both employ the greatest energy efficient equipment possible and also use green power programs. And I would like to add, and/or feature photovoltaic panels on the structure itself. PV is, $69 cents per watt, when 10 years ago it was $7 per watt. So the cost of solar power is really dropped, and it is an affordable alternate. In many ways, this sign is going to be a gateway to the city of Albany, and so as we look at it for design review, having photovoltaics on it would be an outward sign of a sort as well. And I have to wonder, this is more, for the city council as they negotiate, the contract, is there an opportunity to do any public surface messaging? Obviously, it wouldn't be on the full rotation, but every, 10 minutes or so, a message comes up, welcome to Albany, shop local, shop Solano and San Pablo Avenues, Albany Film Festival, things like that. So something the city may want to consider if they aren't already.
Part of the negotiation process, and both public service and public safety announcements, Amber Alerts, those kinds of things are pretty common.
Yeah. But otherwise, I can tell that the language that's proposed is well-researched, and I'm comfortable with it, with the only change I recommend being the additional language encouraging photovoltaics on site.
I'd like to throw something out to you, and that's maybe we put a minimum of 80% energy from photovoltaics. Certainly seems doable at this point. Or set a minimum that we feel comfortable that they need to provide from photovoltaic. Also, I think that, unfortunately, I visualize something like a flat screen TV mounted on the wall. Maybe this thing needs to be integrated into some type of design that's attractive and not just mounted. That would may help make this thing look a little bit better.
Yeah, ideally, it's part of the aesthetic of the
Right.
facility or the neighborhood down there.
But if it's a billboard company, we know what.
But staff indicated the project will come to us as
Right.
well, so we'll have a chance to look at the details then as well.
Right, but to integrate, in the ordinance, we would be integrating the billboard into some type of design.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to make it overly expensive or
Exactly.
have it calling too much attention to
Right.
itself, and the industrial aesthetic that was started at
Right.
Target and is certainly the nature of that stretch along Cleveland and Pierce.
Integrate it into design somehow, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Let the designer figure out how they're going to do it, but not just slap it on the side of the building or freestanding.
So looking at the draft ordinance on page 7, beginning on page 6 and going on page 7, there's a series of criteria ending in H, which talks about energy efficiency, and perhaps that first sentence can be edited to be something like the digital billboard shall employ the latest technology to ensure it achieves the greatest energy efficiency or energy generation, meaning PV panels, presumably, possible. And then the second sentence remained the same, and then added paragraph I, which would be that the digital billboard shall be designed to, I'm not quite sure, not recalling exactly the word you used, but designed to incorporate into the architectural style of the adjacent building, or?
Here's how I'd like to word the energy portion of this, that 100% of the energy will be provided by PV panels. If it cannot be provided, the applicant needs to make recommendations and findings why it cannot be and how they're going to resolve the condition. So we're pointing them towards 100% and making them come up with reasons why they can't meet it.
I think that's a great suggestion.
I do too.
And we'll make that recommendation to the city council, and they can discuss if that's something they want to hold to. Would love to hear what the sign companies have to say about it as well.
Right, and we can consult with them before the council just takes that on to make sure that it's practical and we want to make it. We want them to do everything they possibly can, but not to completely eliminate the feasibility of the project.
Sure, of
And if
course.
it's infeasible or not feasible, then they can come back with an
Yeah.
alternative plan.
Okay.
And maybe one day when all digital billboards are solar, because it makes
Because Albany
economic,
did it.
because it makes economic sense. So we can say it all started here. I was going to suggest that the Bullitt Center is a living building challenge structure. It's a building in Seattle, and they cantilevered the photovoltaic panels on the rooftop out over the public right-of-way in order to achieve enough area to achieve net zero energy. So that might be one to look at. It's a very handsome, simple, straightforward, cap on the building, but it actually adds to the architecture.
But it is Caltrans.
Pardon?
It will be Caltrans.
Yeah, it doesn't, we probably
Yeah.
don't have to, but I'm
Right.
saying.
What's the name of that project again?
The Bullitt Center, Bullitt, I believe.
Thank you.
So my chief concern is really technology is changing so quickly, and that we get the latest, highest resolution, and that who will know which questions to ask to make sure that we're not getting last year's model, that we're getting this year's model, and has a more matte finish, more, higher pixelation. Will that be us when they come to present? Is that someone in Public Works?
Yeah, our former acting city manager, Pat O'Keefe, has some experience with negotiating these agreements, and his role with the city is now being the project manager on this particular project. So we have his expertise. Our current Public Works director also has some expertise in his work in San Carlos with these I think it was San Carlos or Belmont with these agreements. So we're starting with their foundation of experience. We also have, just last night, the council approved a contract with a architectural firm in Southern California that specializes in public works facilities, and they're helping us kind of scope out the specifications for the project. And they too have incorporated billboards into some of the projects that they've done in Southern California. So between the three of them, I think we've got a good start. And then if we need some technical assistance beyond that, that's part of the normal development process that you all are familiar with, and we'll bring that in. And again, you'll see all that when the building comes or the sign comes to you for approval. We'll have that document for you.
Okay. Any further comments? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So do you need a formal
I do
recommendation?
need a formal
I
formal
apologize.
recommendation from the motion on a formal recommendation to the council.
So is that a motion?
Bill, you want to?
Sure, I'll move approval of planning application 2014-01-22, the digital billboard with the conditions and the findings in the staff report and the additional conditions we discussed tonight at the meeting concerning design and photovoltaics.
Wait, the number?
You called it an application?
I'm sorry, it's not. Did I say application?
It's the amendments to the planning and zoning code, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we're recommending these changes to the zoning code to the
Right.
city council.
Right. With the additions as discussed tonight.
Correct.
And
You
what
clear on
section
that?
did you call out? You said section 20-32?
That's the application here, or 2014-01, it's right here on the schedule.
Why am I seeing a different number on?
Am I wrong? Because that's what's on my agenda.
I'm looking at attachment 2, and it says section 20-32 signs.
Well, it's 32, because it's 2014-01 through 22. This is the way it reads here.
Is that
Those
more
are
than
just
one
today's
section?
date.
You're right. That is where it came from. I didn't know we were in England. Today's date, planning and zoning digital billboard amendment to the planning and zoning code.
Yeah, section 20-32 of the zoning code.
Right.
I'll second with that clarification.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Actually, yeah.
Recommendation passes. Okay, moving on to item 7B, permit 13-070, 1357 Marin, second story addition, design review. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes. Before you this evening as a design review request for a two-story addition located at the rear of the home at 1357 Marin. The subject site is a 4,600 square foot lot with an existing 1,113 square foot, two-bedroom, one-bathroom home. The home was built in 1926. The applicant is proposing a modest addition at the rear of 158 square feet. This will accommodate an expansion of the existing living room and also create a dining room. There will also be some internal reconfiguration of the first floor to make it all livable area. Currently, there are bedrooms on the first floor. The second-story addition is proposed to be 1,100 square feet. It will include 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a walk-in closet, and a den sitting area. The overall project scope that would go from a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home to 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. The overall building height would increase from 15 feet to 26 feet. This will result in a 2,530 square foot home, so it would be the maximum 0.55 FAR. There's an existing 440 square foot detached 2-car garage, which is located at the rear of the property and is proposed to remain. The addition has been designed to blend with the existing architecture of the home. The addition will be will be stucco and painted to match. There are front gable roof lines that are proposed, and here up on the screen is the street rendering of the house with the addition. So you can see that they've carried over the front gable details, the event there, and some window details on the front. On the rear elevation, there's a balcony, a second-story balcony that also wraps around to the east side. As always, we provide you with a brief overview of residential design guidelines in your staff report. The Commission is always welcome to direct the applicant to make any changes to ensure compliance with the design guidelines. Within your staff report, we included some potential recommendations to alleviate building mass and to achieve further compliance. This includes using different building materials, such as wood siding or some other material to contrast with the stucco, modifying the window details to be more varied on the east and west elevations. Considering the applicant consider providing trim on the bay details, which are on the east elevation, so these full bays. And then potentially stepping back the second-story addition at the rear and potentially dropping it to alleviate the wall mass. Since we have 3 architects on the Commission, we always welcome your thoughts when it comes to very specific design issues.
We give them to you whether you want them or not. I have a quick question for you.
Just a reminder, Commissioner Moss, you may need to recuse yourself from this one. Is that
Really?
It's at the
Really?
corner of Santa Fe and Marin.
I can check that on Google Earth. I don't think
You
so.
are right. I'm not here. I didn't say anything. Santa Fe Marin.
I'll check it.
No, I think you're right. 10,
It's down around the corner.
yeah. Sure, why not? For safety reasons, I'll recuse myself from this application.
Commissioner Arkin's pulling up the,
Google Earth.
he's
Yeah.
measuring it right now. Give us a moment, please.
Marin, Solano, it's 1042 is the corner of Solano and Santa Fe.
How many houses in from the corner are you?
4th house in.
Oh, there you are.
We haven't opened the public hearing yet. You have a-
No, I know where it's located at. We're close to the 500-foot rule here.
Thank you.
You have it measured out at 500 feet?
We have to recuse ourselves from voting on items that are within 400 feet of our own homes, or 500 feet of our
500
own
feet.
homes, or
500? Yeah,
places of
it's
business.
450 to Marin Avenue, so It's less than 500.
So yeah, you're within 500 feet. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
on the screen is a map that we prepared for you.
Oh, there you go.
That's your residence and the property is.
2 blocks.
Yeah.
Okay. I will recuse myself from this item. Where'd Nick go?
I think he took the opportunity to run to the restroom, so,
Okay.
yeah, that's exactly what I've done.
So we'll wait a few moments until we have 3 commissioners here to. Okay. Thank you for catching that, Anne and Jeff. Okay. We finished the staff report. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Let's bring the applicant forward to present their project.
Excuse myself. Hey, I'm sorry I wait on one of you, our commissioners, okay? I'm glad I have this opportunity. This is the first time that I do any project in the city of Albany, and I look forward to working with you guys more. Even though I'm not the citizen of Albany, Mr. and Mrs. Cole has been a resident a resident in Albany since 1996. Their families get bigger and bigger, so 5 years ago they moved out to San Pablo, thinking, hey, we need a bigger house now, and so on and so forth. And they find out they miss Albany, so they want to come back and say, hey, Tim, do whatever you can, make the house more livable for us. So, and I'm trying to stick to the existing, essentially every guideline that's provided by the city of Albany. I try to follow this, and I just find out we have 2 more architects on the board. I'll welcome your comments, and we'll try to incorporate as much as we can. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
No questions.
We may bring you back up.
I have one question. I didn't catch it yet. Maybe I didn't read closely enough. But the windows are they horizontal sliders or are they casements? The windows on the left elevation.
They are sliders.
Sliders, as well as the right elevation there. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
Most of them are sliders.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the community interested in addressing this item? Tell you what, would you fill out a speaker card and bring it up to Anne? And if anyone else is interested, please do the same.
Dale Fausel.
Thank you. Dale Fausel. My wife and I live at 1355 Marin, which is immediately next door. We just wanted to ask for a few clarifications, if that's appropriate. I'm not too familiar with the process. There's a couple discrepancies in the way the project is written up that we wanted to clarify. Looking at this report, whatever it's called, in one place it talks about 3 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bathrooms, and then under background it says 1 bathroom upstairs. The plans show 2 bathrooms, so I'm assuming it's 2, but that is a discrepancy I wanted to check on. Under exterior elevations, it refers to a balcony, which I see on the plan is presented tonight, but it was not shown on the plan that was online last night. So I wanted to ask about that. In the plan of the new upstairs, it's a curiosity about the labeling, perhaps. It refers to bedrooms 2, 3, and 4, and yet it's described as 3 bedrooms. So I wondered about that. And finally, on the last page of the plan, it shows a garage apparently under the house, which doesn't seem quite right either. I'm sure that's an error. So those are the things that we wanted to clarify, if we could, or get comment on.
Could you?
Oh, yes. And on this report, it talks about deciduous trees on the west and south sides. The west side is the concrete driveway, so I'm guessing the trees are on the south side, but that was just one other clarification. Anything else? The number of parking spaces and whether those are in the driveway or in the garage. Or... Right, okay, right. I think it says currently there's 2 and will be 3, and just we wondered where exactly those spaces will be.
Okay.
Which floor plan were you looking at that showed a garage as part of the house? Or because the site plan is showing it as a separate structure?
Yeah, there is a garage back there. It's sheet A6 of the plan, section AA.
Yeah, there's...
It appears to be a subterranean garage.
Yeah.
Which...
I think that might be a note that just is floating.
But it's worth asking about.
I see the concern. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Are there any other speakers for this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion, and we may have some additional questions for the owner and the applicant.
Well, I'd say that, does staff want to speak to any of the questions that have been brought by the gentleman?
Yes. There are 3 bedrooms. I think in one of the earlier versions, there was a drafting error that we identified to the applicant. So this sheet A4 shows 3 bedrooms on the upper level. There's also 2 bathrooms on the upper level. This is the first floor plan. There is a full bathroom there, but there are no bedrooms noted. So it is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home that is proposed.
And am I correct? There's no limitation on the number of bedrooms.
That's correct.
Yeah, we're on septic here, so, I mean, sewer, city sewer. So there's no septic limitations. Got it. Okay, thank you.
So it's a mislabeling of the rooms, okay. And the patio, the deck comment,
Yeah, the deck doesn't appear on the first
on this,
in the first plans that I pulled up either, but maybe they've been updated.
right.
This is the balcony that's shown from the second story, upper level bathroom in it, or bedroom, I'm sorry, and it wraps around to the east wall.
And then if you shift to sheet A6, does it have the garage labeled in the ground?
It does,
It does,
yeah.
okay. So that's one we can follow up on. I'll tell you what, why don't we continue our conversation, and then we can bring the applicant back up to answer the question about the garage. Nick, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. I appreciate the gentleman bringing up the discrepancies. I think it'd be important to make sure we get those all tied up and corrected. My eye was first led to the left elevation, and I appreciate staff bringing up the same comment I would have, that the window scheme or the whole it feels too plain to me. I'm not an architect, so I'll have to rely on more mundane terms to describe my feeling about it. But yeah, it just seems too plain. I'm personally not a fan of horizontal sliders. I think casements would be more appropriate on this type of house. And I do think that it would be better if the left elevation and perhaps the right elevation had something was done to make them slightly more attractive. Not being an architect, again, I'm not sure exactly what. Other than that, I think those are the extent of my comments so far.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, a few things. First, I appreciate that you're bringing this before us as a study session, so we have a chance to share input and get questions answered, and let the applicants work on it a little bit and bring it back as a final application. We are at a full build out of the allowable floor area ratio at 55%, and as we are on a 4,600 square foot lot, this will not be a small project. So we look for exceptional design and mitigating impacts of the construction. I think the owners and the applicants are taking a very valid approach that's rather common in Albany, where they're saving the front of the house, including the porch, which has a nice relationship with the street, and then at some distance back, adding a second story. So I want to say that I'm happy to see that you're retaining the porch and a lot of the original details on the front of the house. And I find the slight asymmetry of the second floor facing the street to be just fine. I think that's an acceptable elevation. If you look closely at the existing house, you'll notice that the windows are recessed into the wall. And one of the elements of our ordinance that you should be aware of is that new windows need to have that same depth relationship, at least a 2-inch recess from the surface of the glass back from the stucco. So that's a detail that we'll want to see in the final set of plans that we'll be reviewing. One of the things that you might consider, and I think this could help the facades all the way around, and maybe address the concern that Commissioner Pilch brought up about the left elevation in particular, is you could take the horizontal line of the sill of the upper windows and run that as a drip detail, a reveal in the stucco or an actual piece of wood all the way around the building. And that could be one way to articulate and break up the height of the structure. Or as staff suggested, perhaps these bay windows be expressed in a different finish material or maybe just a different color. But those are some ways that I believe could be addressed. Where I have greater concerns actually is on the right elevation, the upper one here, which is facing west. It's facing towards the neighbor's driveway, and it's actually more visible from Marin Avenue because it's up the driveway with some distance between the houses, that I think this facade, this elevation, needs some help. it's pretty clear looking at it where the bathrooms are. And it would be nice to be able to have a more vertical proportion on those bathroom windows, or at least closer to square, rather than using that tall, high, narrow horizontal slider. The other thing that's happening here is that this is just a big, long wall without any real breaking up of it. And one of the areas where you might get double benefit is if you made the stairway more of a bay, not unlike the bays where the windows are located on the left or east elevation. And by doing that, having the stairway extend out from the building wall as a bay, you won't have to have that winder stairway, which is not a legal stairway. You don't have enough tread width at its narrowest point for that to meet the current building code. So even though a lot of older homes have that sort of 45-degree winder stair, the current building code does not allow that. So by making that stairway into a bay, you could achieve a legal stairway without having the top and the bottom of the steps push into your hallway, and at the same time get the benefit of a little more interest on that west elevation, the right elevation. So those are a few things that I'd like to recommend at this time, and we look forward to this coming back to us.
Thank you. I think those are excellent comments. I was actually thinking exactly the same thing about the staircase, having an extension out. You could even make it wider and include the bathrooms as well, if you wanted to have kind of a larger bay. But I think what I appreciate about your left elevation is that you are trying to break up the line of the roof with the smaller gables. I think that could be a nice detail that would be repeated on the right elevation, and it's an opportunity to really open up the stairwell with some windows, some vertical windows along there. I was curious about the decision to remove the fireplace in the chimney, which seems to be an interesting detail, and I'm wondering if the chimney is currently in not good shape, or the fireplace is not in good shape, or if it's a feature that you wouldn't use. So I'd be curious about that. It seems that it's a detail and an architectural element that would also enhance the right elevation and add character to the home. I was also curious, I forgot to look when I was out there at the existing front window, if the current window is a slider, and if the idea of coming back with additional sliders is to match the front window, or if those are casement windows with a fixed center. And because I think that it would make sense to repeat what's there if it's in good shape. But I was curious about that. And the roof line is, and it's, you see them around here, the lack of soffit detail is a very modern kind of detail where the roof is close to, it has a pure geometry, and I think that can be done really well. But what happens then is that the details for the windows and the details for the vents become that much more important because you don't have the overhang of the roof. And so I understand that you picked up the detail for the ridge vent to match the existing facade, but it could be that it's changed a little bit to add some more character so that it's not just punched like a cyclops right in the forehead. So those are the questions I have. I don't know if there were other questions from my fellow commissioners, but I'd be interested in bringing you back up and hearing your responses.
Yeah, I only had one other question, which is the balcony, as it's illustrated here, appears to be cantilevering out of the building structure, and I'm wondering, is that going to end up having to have posts or brackets to support it, which might be, more durable and is perfectly acceptable if you prefer, but just something to think about. How does that work structurally?
Would you be willing to come up? So why don't we start the question with the balcony? If it will be structurally supported with posts, brackets, or cantilevered, maybe a cable system.
Okay, we'll answer the easy one first, okay? The balcony is really 1/3 out, 2/3 in, so just to meet the structural code, we do not intend to put any posts underneath. To answer our neighbor's concern, that was a last-minute addition that we made to the drawing, perhaps Ann did not put it into the website, and I'm sorry for that, okay?
I'm sorry, which edition is that?
So what we have is really the final version, okay? For instance, the mislabel of the bedroom and cut that too, okay? So I'm truly sorry we made that typo and causing all this confusion among everybody, okay? And the balcony was a later addition. The garage underneath, once upon a time we were planning to do a garage underneath, and I'm saying it's really it will turn out to be a lot of excavation. You disturb too much on the soil. I just prepare it so Mr. Cole can get a feel for it, and it's really not a feasible proposal. That's why we have eliminated that. And once again, I'm sorry if that caused confusion. Comes to the slider, that's pretty much the way it is. We just merely trying to match it, and I don't want the second story to look too much different than the front. You are absolutely correct. The existing porch is really lovely, and we try to preserve that as much as we could. You are absolutely correct. We are trying to maximize it, and like I say, I'm trying to do it within the envelope, and I am pushing the envelope, and like I say, the house is a little bit too small. We have a big extended family, and as a matter of fact, they just welcomed their grandson, so essentially we want to move back and turn this into a long-time residence, okay? In terms of the window recess, and by all means, we have intent to do that. The commissioner's recommendation saying, hey, push that back, make the stair a little bit easier to negotiate. Why? What we're talking about, what Commissioner Atkins talking about, you have to have a minimum 6 inch at the narrowest point, and absolutely, I did meet the requirement, but it's hard to maneuver and all. I have full intention of adjusting it so we can make, even though you pass it, it's hard to move the furniture, the mattress up and down, and I fully concur with your version of having it larger. The chimney is really not in a good shape, and as a matter of fact, we just gone through how many days saying you cannot burn wood fire at night, and is it really worth it? And what they talking about, you have to put in a zero emission wood fire burning place, even though it's existing. We have to modify it because of the fact that you are extending it. The chimney need to go at least 2 feet above the closest distance and all, and it was up to a long debate. It's better to have it removed, and after all, you have to seismically brace it, and that's why we have that removed. And I think I addressed every single one of the question, I hope.
Commissioner Arkin, you mentioned that the right elevation was on the neighbor's driveway, but I believe that's incorrect. No, it's oh, it is? Okay,
I think it's both driveways go up that edge of the building.
I'm sorry, it's their driveway. On our side.
Yes.
okay. I'm confused. Hold on.
Here.
Part of the reason we do not want to push it out is the existing driveway is 9 foot wide. Hey, where is the actual property line and all? I really don't know. I have to take a fifth on it. And we have no intention of working on that side at all.
Yeah, I mean, you've got more than adequate clearance for the driveway, which is great. And if you were to do a small bay for the stairwell, that landing could be well above the height of the driveway, and it wouldn't impede on cars at all. So, thank you. Those are good answers to our questions and ideas, and I don't think we're taking action tonight. We'll see this one again.
I do have a question for Commissioner Arkin. Would you be willing to approve the windows if they were like awning or hoppers, so that they didn't have the vertical divider? They weren't sliders, but they popped out. They could be a little bit more interesting if they didn't, with the stair chase, the stair bay between the sets of horizontal windows. If we were to eliminate that vertical break in the window, it may not need to be so square. I agree that it would allow for more light and more air circulation. I think a larger
We're just talking
window
about
would be nice.
the narrow windows above the tub.
Yeah, the
so-
language of them on the wall, on the exterior elevation.
Yeah, I just think if they could achieve, closer to a square proportion as an opening, either they go up closer to the ceiling or, they drop down and you do a tile sill on them, so they're, part of the tub space, and then have obscure glass.
What, the horizontal
Especially
window to the right
the
on
lower,
the lower level, I'm not sure I understand where
yeah, that one
that's-
doesn't even appear in plan currently.
Okay. So that's actually helpful. It looks better if that one's eliminated. But even if these were, I agree that they could be a little bit taller. But to me, it's the language of the slider in that horizontal position is fighting the other windows a little bit as well.
Right, and on the lower level, those would be, at the vanity and the toilet, so they don't
They
have
could
to be, above a tile tub surround or something. So anyways, well, I think we can leave it to the engineer to, do some work on it and bring it back.
Okay. Did we answer all of your questions and give you the feedback you needed to move forward? Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 7B. I'm sorry, 7C. Permit application 13-040, 833 Solano Avenue, new single-family construction study session. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes. Before you is the second study session for preliminary design review for 833 Solano. The subject property is a 3,750 square foot lot with an existing 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, about 1,000 square feet in area, built in 1954. The applicant is proposing to demolish that home and create a new home, which will be 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and have an attached 2-car garage. Decks are proposed on the second and third levels. You previously reviewed this on September 11th, 2013, at which time you provided the applicant with very specific feedback, and there is a bulleted list in your staff report requesting that they include additional window details on the front elevation, lower the roof spring height, eliminate the greenhouse window that was on the east elevation, consider a small peak roof over the main entrance, carriage doors for the garage, holding the plate lines as low as possible, narrowing space between windows, showing additional detail on the site plan, moving the center of the gable to the center of the door, and bringing the stairway closer to the sidewalk. And so in your staff report and on the screen, you have a top and bottom comparison. So this top elevation is what you looked at before. As you can see, the bottom elevation is quite a bit different. The applicant has gone forward and added a window here where previously there wasn't one. They've added wood trim details under the gable. They've also added some corbel details below the balcony above the garage and shown what looks to be 2 single-car panels. They've also gone ahead and eliminated that greenhouse window and made it a full bay. They've also added some additional detail there with the roof, some bracket details. And also the roof line over the front porch entry was changed based on your recommendation. The other matter that was discussed was the west elevation, the west-facing elevation, which faces out to the bay. The top elevation is what you looked at before. It had some pretty large windows that were spaced apart. And below is there's obviously the revised elevation where the windows are now these larger picture windows with trim around them, both on this projecting side and back here. They've also included, for context, the neighbor's house at 835 Solano to show that their house will be set back quite a bit from where that building faces, and that based on this illustration, they are doing what they can to preserve their views. The other thing to note is that here you have this design element at the front entry, and that has been eliminated in the latest proposal. The applicant is here this evening, and I'm sure can speak more to the specifics, but it has changed quite a bit based on the direction you provided last September.
Thank you. Would you be interested in coming forward and presenting your project?
I'm Ron Havens. I'm the owner, contractor, and designer of this project. Based on our last meeting, I pretty much went through point by point and corrected everything that you pointed out to me. As far as the southwest corner of the building goes, I added the window above. On the opposing side, I added a window as well as a 2.6 full lighted door below that, which doesn't show from the street, but it shows on the north elevation on the full set of plans. So there's considerably more glass area in the bay than there was before. The balance of the west elevation, I pretty much need for shear strength and structural considerations. Building has to have a steel moment frame there anyway, and because of the relocation of the half bath to the adjacency of the front porch, that window space is pretty much lost, but it is balanced by windows in the south elevation. As far as building height goes, I never really got a clarification on what the term spring height means. I asked for one, but I didn't get one. I assume that means the height of origin of the building rather than the full roof height. At our last review, you suggested that I lower the plate line elevation of the living room. It had a 9-foot ceiling. I lowered that ceiling to 8 foot. So I reduced the main part of the tower of the building by 1 foot in height. The overall height is pretty much determined by the depth of the garage. I have about 8 inches to daylight for a slotted drain in front of the garage door. I have a downsloping driveway,
And to the lowest point in the lot, there's only about an 8-inch differential between the garage apron and the low point of the lot. So I'm pretty much locked into that height. You know, I could only go higher. Going lower would endanger the drainage capability of the building and possibly create problems in the front end of the building in terms of severe drainage situations. The rear, I eliminated the pop-up detail on the rear section of the building. I raised the overall height, one riser height of the rear section of the building to help mitigate the split levels. So now there are 3 risers between the levels rather than 4, as was originally, and that was addressed in the last meeting, and this is to help mitigate that. So to reduce the impact of that height increase, that's 7 3/4 inches, I eliminated the pop-up area of the roof and dropped about 9 inches, making that rear northern roof area about 3 inches lower than it was originally planned. I think that these are pretty much the best I can do with this building as far as trying to get it down into the ground. If I could go lower, I probably would go about a foot lower, but the drainage considerations prevent doing that. I repositioned the building 8 feet further back onto the lot, and I did that to help alleviate the view obstruction for 835. Sonny granted my son Ash permission to go up and take pictures. He took pictures. I, based on what I saw in the pictures from their windows, I felt that from that kitchen window that there would be very limited view obstruction, that the Golden Gate Bridge would still be visible from that window, that the living room window would have full panorama still, and the back end of their building, which they informed me was less critical to them, would be less impacted. So she'll still be able to look out our kitchen window and see the sun setting on the Golden Gate. And from the pictures, which I also emailed to Ann, it appears that there'll be a pretty reasonable view from there. There will be pretty limited obstruction. I don't think that the building tucked back like that would impact any other buildings. It looks like pretty much open space to the north there, and it doesn't appear to be a problem there. So also in doing that, I moved the entire second and third floor 3'6" to the rear. So the overall effect of the building is originally that tower, the high part of the building, or the south face of the elevation, not counting the garage, is essentially 11.5 feet further to the rear of the lot than it was. So it's now the apron of the garage is 20'6" from the property line, the setback, the front setback. So the garage is actually pushed forward 3'6" and then dropped back 8 foot from its original position. That's a little confusing, but that was an engineering consideration more than anything else to get the bearing on that front wall to align with the bearing wall below and eliminate the need for girders and so forth and suspended bearing at that point. And it also serves to create more privacy, I think, for the individual living there and for the neighbors as well, because the house is considerably further set back from the street than the other 2 houses next to it. The greenhouse window, that's pretty obvious. I'm I'm not going to elaborate too much on that. I made it a full box bay, and I tried doing it at 1 foot, but it just didn't look right, so I dropped it down to 6 inches. Still creates the same effect in the kitchen and doesn't impose on the elevations as badly. So the entryway got impacted fairly seriously. We eliminated the flat roof. We created a Spanish-style shed roof over the front porch, and we moved the half bath adjacent to that, kind of creating a private corridor to the west. And also, it really is the more ideal and less awkward spot for the half bath. That because of the vertical configuration of the house, a half bath is pretty much a necessity. This gives it access to the front yard with the man door, and the bay gives it access to the backyard and eliminates the need for anyone having to use either the downstairs bath or the master bath when they're working outside. And puts it adjacent to the stairwell landing as well, which is more convenient than the location it was in before. The garage area, I added a carriage door detail. I still would really prefer to have a 16-foot full garage door there with a detail that looks like 2 doors to eliminate the posting in the center because of vehicle access for this subterranean garage, the traffic patterns from the hill above, and entry and exit considerations, and for entry and exit versatility and storage versatility in the garage itself. Perhaps person may only want to park 1 vehicle in there and use half of it for a gym area or something like that. So it gives the occupant more versatility than a double door setup would allow. It gives them more options for parking, storage, and safety. The plate line height's 0.6, I've already addressed that. The south elevation, the imbalances that were brought up in the first meeting, what I did to mitigate that was I moved the garage structure 1 foot to the east. And that allowed me to align all the post lines for the decks above, align all the window lines, create the same pilaster pattern on either side of those windows, and get them more in balance with the ridge line of the building, as that was a point of concern before. I need to backtrack a little bit. One thing I forgot was in the garage area as well. I have a relief arch detail there with a corbel and trellis system above. There are also added trellis systems to the west elevation above both window banks. They aren't real clear in these small drawings, but they are there. The siding would be western reds, stalactite knot, cedar, stained semi-transparent. Stucco would be painted. It would be a semi-smooth plaster-like finish stucco. And those wood areas would also be apparent, not just in the gable area, but in the full length of the south elevation. It doesn't really show up on the drawing too well, but those wood lines would continue top to bottom on that. They aren't large areas, but it would create a more vertical effect around the windows and a more unifying effect there. I lifted the roof line of the bay, the west-facing bay, up above the roof line of the pitched area to create kind of a chimney type of effect, but still give it that Spanish feel. And I think that's pretty much everything. I did not, I addressed verbally in my letter to Ann, I don't know if you have that on file, my plan for landscaping. I did not include a landscaping plan in this set of drawings. My plan is to fully landscape the property. I wasn't aware that a landscaping plan was actually needed. I thought it was only suggested. One of the things I've been investigating is sodding the flat roof areas on the lower structure of the garage and creating planted areas with planters there, as well as sodded grass areas. And particularly on the eastern side, the deck there is not very big. You know, it's not nearly as big as the drawing makes it appear. The railing's been pushed out because there needs to be a railing there for over the garage door because of building code and safety considerations, but that would actually be planted area in the front of the garage there rather than deck space, you know, just large deck space, so that from the uphill side or from the eastern side, you know, it would have the appearance of yard more so than the appearance of structure in that area. And I would continue that along that adjacent eastern side there with a step down in elevation, but another grassy area there as well, so that there would be a yard area along the eastern property between 835 and 833. And I think that's pretty much it. I've already investigated the engineering impacts and cost impacts of doing the sodding on the roof. It's something I would like to do. I think it's pretty positive. It's a little cost impactful, but I think in the long run that it would be a real positive asset to the building and to the yard area that is pretty much eaten up by the driveway because of the requirement for the two-car garage. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you.
Can you explain something to me a little bit further? This grade you're talking about, the 8-inch grade, you're substantially below the height limit at this point. Why is it that you're pressing so low? I mean, I know we want you to go as low as possible, but you're 3 feet below the height limit. And I'm not a real fan of downsloping driveways that are too steep to get cars.
Why am I going so low?
Yeah.
Pretty much just to mitigate the impact of the building itself to the adjacent buildings is the main reason. And I think that because of the mass of the lower end of the building, that putting it subgrade kind of helps to mitigate that mass, the impact of that mass, and creating sodded areas on top of those flat plains will help to make it seem almost like a berm house,
right,
so to speak.
But I'm concerned about the slope of the driveway on the high side.
On the high side?
Yeah.
Could we pull up the elevation?
It's a little
that shows
challenging,
the
but
neighbor's house?
I think it's pretty doable.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of length available.
You know, I've got a 20-foot transition to make that grade, so I've penciled it out a few times, and you know, the west side is fine. You know, there's pretty much a 5-foot drop in elevation across that 16-foot in the driveway plane there. At that point in the hill, it's just about the steepest part of the hill. So that's another reason why I would like the 16-foot wide garage doors, so that the driver can negotiate and get out into the better side of the driveway rather than into the steeper side of it, and get a better transition into the traffic.
I had another question, if I may.
Sure.
Are you done?
For now.
Okay. What type of window are you proposing?
The window brand?
Brand or material?
They're going to be vinyl clads, most likely red. Vinyl exterior, Sierra Pacific or something similar.
And
you know, a medium end, not a super high end, but not a super low end as well.
Sierra Pacific, I think, is an aluminum clad window, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Aluminum
right.
clad.
Sorry, it's late.
I was going to also say, I recently worked with a historian who actually is recommending fiberglass clad now for a historic project up in Sonoma because the longevity of the windows. So.
And you can paint it.
And you can paint it.
Yeah. But an aluminum clad wood window would be that's a fine choice.
Yeah, and then I would like to have the paint detail in the top. I'm not quite sure the architectural name for that, but
yeah, it's kind of a craftsman style,
kind of
with
a craftsman type detail.
A simulated divided light, so it's actually applied on the surface of the glass, not just between the panes of glass.
Right.
Perfect.
I think for clarification, I might be misspeaking, but I think we would be more of an advocate for an aluminum clad or a fiberglass window over vinyl. So when you're.
I'm not interested in putting vinyl
Okay.
on this building.
I think he misspoke.
Did I misspoke?
No, he
He
misspoke.
misspoke, yeah. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
No, I'm not interested
If it
in
comes
putting
back to
on
vinyl,
this building.
we might want to discuss a little bit. Did you have any additional questions?
No questions, no.
Remind me what the siding is again, the vertical siding that connects the windows on the west side? Is it?
Tied knot western red cedar.
Okay.
I haven't as yet determined what the cut of the siding will be. I tend to favor board-on-board type detail, so that it creates a lot of shadow, vertical shadow.
Will it be oiled or sealed?
It'll be a semi-transparent stain, so that the wood grain will show through, and the wood will be apparent. It won't be painted solid. And then all windows will have a western red cedar casing, and then the windows will be inset with the casing inside of the inset. That doesn't show up on the elevations very well. So those windows that don't have the vertical detail will still have a wood casing around them.
Okay.
And I also added the decorative corbels at the roof overhang. The fascia will be tied knot western red cedar as well. And will be, all wood areas will be stained to match, So it'll be pretty much a two-color exteriors scheme with the window cladding being the accent color.
Are your windows and doors 6'8" or 7 feet? The headers.
The headers, they'll probably be 7 foot, so that they even out with the header line all the way around the windows. But I was told by the engineer, and I didn't have that on this plan, that I would have to reduce those two front doors to 5/0 doors. And they're designed to 6/0 doors right now, but I need to get that extra shear to make the numbers work, so you can't argue with the engineer. Maybe you can, but I can't. And I was also hoping that you would vote in approval tonight.
Well, is that on the agenda? It looks like we're asking for feedback. Is that correct?
Right,
Yeah.
it wasn't noticed for action, but
Okay.
I think depending on how this conversation goes, it's possible the next.
And I can provide you with the landscaping plan upon submittal if you need it, or upon the next review and vote. But this is a family project. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of misfortune going on in our family, a couple of tragic deaths, and also some good news with the coming of a grandchild. So my son and I are pretty anxious to get ourselves in a new environment and have some fun. And for us, work is fun.
Well, if there are no more questions for the applicant, I think that there might be an additional speaker in the audience.
I just wanted to.
I'll tell you what, we'll ask you to come up to the speaker and give us your name. You're on TV.
My name is Ash Evans, I'm Ron's son, and I just wanted to show you a quick picture idea of what the wood siding would look like in the finished product. Not necessarily the exact finish or whatnot, just the board-on-board detail and the transparency.
Thank you.
So that's stained redwood.
Oh, yeah.
It would pretty much take the same as the western ones.
Okay.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other speakers in the audience that would like to address the commission on this item?
Hi, my name is Saint Juan. I was here in September about this issue. I really, first of all, I appreciate that Mr. Havens try to work, with me, with my house and their house, that it's going to be built. But there's some questions that I get a little confused about the property line. And I did call the Marin survey company. They told me that the mark they put it on the sidewalk, the X they carved, and through that line all the way, that there is the nail that they put it in all the way to the side of the house with the blue plastic cap. They said that is the official, the property line. And so the number with that one and what Mr. Havens proposed is different. So I asked them, why is it different? They say usually county assessors, the number of footage it's a reference. So that's why people do get the new survey, so they can actually record it to the county with a new survey. And that, it's not clear yet. If nobody told me exactly, what is exactly the property line is, as far as that I know, is that they said that the line that they put a mark on the blue cap is the property line. They usually are very accurate. If there is any chance of, the mistake would be maybe 2-3 inches from that line. And this is what they told me. They should, if that is, I said that is a property line, then they shouldn't be over my side of the property beyond that line. They say no. So I'm really confused about this property line before we go any further, And the Mr. Havens' son came in and also my house, and he took some pictures from my house, all the views of my house. And I told you I've been living there since 1983. And that's the reason I bought that house, because it was small, but it was a nice elevated little place that I can have a view of the bay. And after, I was looking at, after he left, and I look at the front backside of the house. Actually, if they move back in the backside of the house, there isn't anything much of a front of them that would block their view. I think that they can still come down to the level of my window, below my window level. They can still have a full view of the side, the back side of the back side of the further back side of the house. So that, of course.
Would you point to the elevation behind you and reference what you're
so this
asking
is,
for?
They decided to leave these 2 windows for me. And from here to back here, I have 3 rooms on that side. From here of them, there's no house or nothing, because there's quite a bit of the slope down to all those homes. I don't think they have to come up that far up to get the view of what they can get from this point. That's what I looked at, and I think I saw, the way it seems to me they could have still part of a cover maybe my window, but not all the way, because that would definitely block a lot of sunlight, and it's really, I think, not happy to look at in the morning, open the window, see the cement, wall right in the front of your window, instead of looking out, open space out there. So that is also, that's my concern. And
So you're asking them to shift the house even further north? Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking them to lower the height of the house?
Well, I think, if either way they can leave that back window at least not completely block from their, the house right into the, the house level. They can lower a little bit at least, I'm trying to work with them too. And if they can lower a little bit, so at least I have a part of window that I can look out, whatever that I can see with also having some, the full sunlight come in. And
What rooms are on the other side of the two windows that are exposed? The two windows that I'm seeing here, that we're seeing here?
This one?
Mm-hmm. Is that your living room?
This is my living room. This is the front, this is Solano Street, this is front of the house. And this is my living room, there's a deck. And this is my kitchen, and which, they decided to leave that, which is, I really appreciate that. Really, that's the one I use to wash dishes, do whatever I see to go to get breeze all the time. And then from there, back here, there are 3 more rooms on this side.
And are those bedrooms?
There are the 3 bedrooms all the way down. One is used as office, the other one is my son's room. He comes back home sometimes to use that room, and then my bedroom is the back. So when I,
We have A1.
So that's a kind of, concern me a little bit, that I just don't want it to suddenly, I get used to seeing this kind of a view for the whole 30-some years, and then you wake up and open the window, there's some big, giant, the cement or stucco wall right in front of me. I think that would really makes me feel very unhappy. So if there's any way they can work, when I look at this, from this part right here, the back part, the back part, there is no house or nothing that stands in front of them. It's kind of dropped, so there's nothing there. So they could probably either lower or go back and leave some part of my window open, for instead of having the big wall in front of the windows.
Thank you.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Alexa Hauser. I live at 902 Taylor Street. My kitchen window looks directly at this house. The little tiny house that's there now and this big house that's probably coming. First of all, I want to say that it's clear, I wasn't here at the last hearing, but it's very clear that you gave substantive comments to Mr. Havens, and that they responded by coming back with lots of really what appears to be accommodating activity while still creating a house that looks like it would be a nice place to live and would be safe. My concern actually at this moment, besides just the adjustment of suddenly seeing mostly house rather than trees and plantings, is the idea of sod on a roof, given that we live in California and we're in a drought. And we're in a drought right now. We're not going to be in a drought forever, maybe, but I'd really like them to consider, as they develop their landscaping plan, that they would look at drought-tolerant types of analogs to sod on roofs. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no other speakers, we're going to close the comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Does the applicant want to respond to anything?
Well, I know that I'm going to have some additional questions, and
Okay.
we might bring them back up.
I'd like the staff to bring up A1.
In the interest of time, I thought we could all give our comments and bring them back up just at one time at the end.
Perfect. We're going to talk about it in a second.
You said A1?
Yeah. No, we'll talk about it now.
This is A1.
Right. One of the things I noted looking at this in the layout, the darker part of it is actually the house that goes up. The lighter gray is the house that's on above the first floor in the garage. So you can see how much the design's actually pulled away from your house and actually steps back even further. There's a notch back there. So although you're not going to have views straight out your windows, you're going to have views out at an angle. Oakland, the airport, South San Francisco, that type of thing, Bay Bridge. I understand your concern, but from what I'm seeing here, a lot of these houses are only, less than 10 feet apart, and here is substantially more space between the houses. So I understand your issues with your Golden Gate view, and the unfortunate thing is Albany, and I do say unfortunate because this has happened to me, the unfortunate thing is we don't have a view ordinance here that protects your views. So we ask the applicants to try to work with what they have. And I think in this case, by moving the house to the west and stepping it back, it's offered you a lot of light and air to your house. So I know it's not a perfect solution, but I think that the applicant's actually trying to work with you on this issue about the 3-bedroom windows. So that's as far as I want to take it for now.
Well, can I piggyback on that? And there's an elevation that shows the windows on her house, and it's showing
Further back.
Yeah, it's showing 2 windows, and I am appreciative that the applicant is interested in or was able to pull the house back to preserve the views in the kitchen and the living room. I think that was a really nice gesture to the neighbor, but I think that this is a reasonable location for the house to and that the privacy in the bedrooms are such that unfortunately they are losing the views, but it seems that maintaining the unobstructed view of the kitchen and the living room would be the priority. And I don't think that the house is going to be able to be pulled back enough or dropped enough to actually give you unobstructed views of the bedrooms anyways. So unfortunately, I think that this is I would be willing to prove it in this location. As for the survey, you can have your own surveyor come out and confirm that the location of the stakes is accurate. You can invite the surveyor out who installed the stakes to have a conversation and confirm that those are accurate. I would recommend doing one or both of those to give yourself to educate yourself and make sure that your understanding of where the property line is and their understanding of the property line is consistent. I don't know if that would be helpful. Sorry, I jumped in there, but...
No, I was just going to also go with the survey and say that the front of your house, it's 3'1" from the front of the house going west to the property line, and at the rear it's 3'0", and so Well, see, this is, okay. Yeah, yes, but see, this is why we had it open, then we asked for comments, then we closed the meeting. Come up and mention it, talk about it.
My name is Ed Weiss. I live with Sonny Pomona. The markers that she commented on are located coming back from the sidewalk. Now, we know they were done by the Marin company because we saw their names on their outfits. They were done in the early half of the year. And Mr. Havens, we asked him if he had that done, and he said no to us the last meeting here. And so Sonny called the Marin company, and a lady talked to her, and she said, that's an official survey. Now, the mark on the sidewalk is etched. They scratched it in. And there are 3 other blue marks that are survey markers, and they're a little blue tape, and they have a silver nail stuck in the ground. Back along the sidewalk that's next to the old building that's going to be turned down, and they're less than 3 feet away from the old building. And they are approximately 12 feet from the 3-foot edge of where Mr. Havens said he owns, the 3-foot edge from Sonny's house. So that would put it 12 feet in from the 37.5-foot border that he said he owns.
So,
Well, that is correct. It is at 12 feet.
So that would give him a reduction of 12 feet, which would, instead of having a 37.5-foot lot, would give him a 25.5-foot lot. Those markers come right back alongside of that old house. Now, if that lady said that's an official survey, and that's the property line, and those markers are still there that you could go and look at, we're inclined to go get our own survey, and if we find that our surveyor says that's Sonny's property line, then my suspicion is that property was sold to Sonny's prior owner of that 835 property, and some prior record would indicate that, and that she would own 37 feet of property and he would own 25.5 feet.
so I'm
And
gonna.
he wouldn't be able to build this building.
I'm going to go real quick. I'm going to go real quick here. From what I can look at the survey, those X marks that are cut are offsets. Sometimes
That's what I was
surveyors
gonna
do an
say.
offset because they can't get right to the property line.
But that's not what the lady said on the phone call.
I don't care what anybody said. I've got the facts in front of me.
Yeah.
Now, you both have title reports when you got the properties.
Yeah.
And that's what you own. And so if it says 37.5 feet, which is confirmed by the survey, then it's 37.5 feet.
If we could find that out, we could put this to bed. And I don't know why
Well,
Mr.
it's-
Havens would say that he didn't have a survey done.
Well, he may not have had it at the time he talked about it.
Yeah.
But again, this is a survey, it shows an offset on the X marks. So it says that you, from 3.1 feet from the edge of your house west is the property line, and then from there to the existing structure is 12.3 feet.
That's right.
So this survey's saying what you're saying. This happens sometimes when surveyors get out there, they can't mark right on the property corner, so what they do is they file an offset. And they say from this point over to here, 5 feet at such and such angle is the property line. And that's what's recorded with the,
Yeah, those marks are on the drawings.
right, I see them right
They
here.
don't, but that doesn't say that it's an offset.
Well, I can see it's an offset. That's the issue.
Yeah, it's likely what they marked on the sidewalk was the original 25-foot plat of that whole area. And that's what that line that you see running off the left of the screen is the original plat on the properties behind. So, a licensed property surveyor gave them this map, and I've never seen a surveyor be wrong to that degree. But again, as the other commissioner said, I think it's, if you're, want confirmation, you can get a surveyor out and have them just review your title report.
But that
and that'll
property
do it.
was available to him to mark it right on the spot where he could have marked it 3 foot from her house.
Yeah, I don't know why they
It's
didn't.
accessible.
Well, there's something concrete right there along the sidewalk that they may not have been able to get to it, or the accuracy, but,
Yeah, well, okay.
What I'd recommend is contacting Marin
We'd
and
just like to know.
asking them to come out. And you may have to pay them for their time, but
Yeah,
asking
that's
someone
right.
to come out and clarify the markings in the survey, and I think that would put you at ease. Yeah,
and Mr.
that would be-
Havens had to have a title report when he bought the property. So that's available, and that goes to the surveyor, so the surveyor actually takes those dimensions. And so it does look like Commissioner Arkin said, this was once a 25-foot wide lot, and at some point it became a 37.5-foot wide lot. And so now, who owns it? That's up to the title
Yeah,
company.
However it is to get
We're
that
g-
settled
Well,
in
you-
our minds.
Title report.
Yeah, the city zoning map agrees with the layout that's
Yeah, because
illustrated here.
obviously the assessor's map shows what it does show, 37.5 to 833. Yeah.
You know what, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to discussing the design review of the project, and
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
But you can resolve this pretty quickly yourself. So.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, let us
If it's
go
about
ahead
the
and
survey,
have
we don't
our
want to talk about it,
comments,
because I
and
think that it's accurate the way, I've known Marin for 35 years, and I've never known him to be off by more than 1/10 of an inch or so. So I
you know what, we can't have the conversation going into the
audience.
because we actually need everything to be caught on the audio for people who are viewing from home. So we're going to hold off on any comments just for the moment and continue the comments here from the commission, and we'll probably invite you back up and you can speak to that. Let's see. Okay.
You want to start?
Yeah, I can start because I'm going to be real quick. The only comment I had was about the height, actually, about you reducing your 9-foot ceiling to 8 feet. Now you've re-engineered everything, and you might not want to undo that, but I don't see any reason why you wouldn't, why you would go back up to 9 instead of 8. If all other things being equal. So otherwise, I really like the project, and I agree with my fellow commissioners that you've done a good job at trying to mitigate the impacts to the neighbors, and that unfortunately, to the neighbors, this is within our code to allow to be built, and we can't, it's not our job to mitigate all impacts. So, that's it.
Thank you. So, I'm sorry, you were advocate for 8-foot ceilings versus, 9 foot instead of 8 foot?
Actually, he at some point he mentioned reducing the height by a foot and reducing the ceiling height of living room, I think it was, from 9 to 8. So perhaps the other commissioners can speak to that. But
yeah, I mean, their living room features cathedral ceiling, so while it's 8 feet at the spring point at the plate, it'll go up to 9.5 at the center. So I think it's a very grand space.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't need to be taller.
Okay.
And to answer your question, the spring point is the C cut. Or bird's beak, or how we used to call it, I don't know, centuries ago.
All right, well, I think others have addressed the matter of a lot of things related to the view in the survey. I will make my last comment first, and then I'll make it again at the end. This is a great little house. It's very well designed, and it's not very big. I think you heard us in our last hearing and responded with some very artful changes. And if I could, I would approve this tonight, but I guess it wasn't noticed for approval, so we'll see it again at a future date. the respect for the neighbor's views is really appreciated. You know, the house sets back quite a ways in order to preserve, you know, the daylight and the views from their primary windows. And I think that's not something that everyone would, you know, be able to do, and you've done it and very well. So again, I don't think there are any changes that you need to make, but if you wanted, I think the arches that you've added are unnecessary. I think the roof that's over the stairway doesn't need to be that tall, but if you want to have it that way, that's absolutely fine by me. I appreciate your showing the street curb on the front elevation. It's very helpful for us to have that as a datum to be able to see what the real presence of the house is going to be. The garage door at 16 feet, you know, using a carriage house style is absolutely fine. And I appreciate that it's difficult to maneuver that steeper edge of the driveway. So being able to use that door is absolutely okay. In terms of the tiled roof, I'm sorry, the living roof, there are tiled systems or living roof systems where you can use sedums or other, you know, plants that don't require a lot of irrigation. You know, there's not a lot of yard area here, so how you choose to landscape that, I think it becomes a primary living space off the house. But I'll say it again, it's a great little house, and I look forward to seeing it in our city.
Did you have additional comments?
Just a couple. And I do agree with the Commissioner Ark. I think it's a very nicely designed house. I think it fits the site well. I think it fits the site almost too well. I am going to disagree with the applicant. You've got a 26.8 slope on your driveway on the high side and 11% on the low side. Yeah, that's a little, and I'm going with a 24-foot driveway. It may be a little bit less, I don't know, from the property line to the back of sidewalk. I guesstimated about 4 feet. So that said, I think you're not going to make it with those slopes. You know, and so that concerns me. So I think the house or something's going to have to come up.
It would be better for the bedrooms to come out anyway. It would be better for the bedrooms to have the windows lifted out of the ground anyway.
Yeah, exactly, that one bedroom. So again, having done thousands of these houses on hillsides, well, that's an exaggeration, probably about 500 on hillsides. The rest are about 1,000 every place else. But I am concerned that slope, in my mind, I wouldn't wish that on my client. I've put in houses with 20% slopes, and they've had to have transitions to get to 20%. Going from street level down to 20%, you're gonna high point the car. You're not gonna be able to get that. So as you're coming down Solano, I'm trying to make a right turn in there. You're not gonna be able to cut that close. You're always gonna be going down to the downhill side, and backing up a 20% or 26% slope is almost impossible. If we ever have rain again, you'd never make it out of there. So I think that has to be studied very, very closely, because I think you're going to find that your driveway is too steep. It's not going to make it. And part of that is, you know, I have to, as a commission, we have to look at, you know, you coming back, and you may want to look at that before you come back in 2 weeks, and have your engineer look at it and say, can this work? So I, like Commissioner Arkin, would strongly suggest look at that, and I believe we can put this on the consent calendar for the next time. Because I appreciate, oh, one more thing. You'll thank me about this later. The door from the stairway out to the backyard, flip it, swing it out. Don't swing doorways like that in, because the rain comes down that door right into the threshold and right into the house. You always want those doors to swing out. Huh? Yeah, well, Exactly, but here, you get, that side of the house is gonna get the most rain, and you're gonna have rain coming down that door, and you're gonna have, later on go, why didn't the commission tell me that? So it's just a benefit of having lived here for a number of years, knowing that you, in cases like this, you really want the door to swing out. But that was a minor point. So
That's
I'm
a good catch.
pretty much done.
I also support the single-car garage. That makes sense. I'd recommend looking at a beautifully designed front door because it's going to have such a relationship to the sidewalk. And I just want to make sure that it's not a contractor door from Home Depot that's installed, that it's something that is fitting to the house. Okay. Let's see.
Well, add on to that, frankly, we have one of the best areas for getting recycled doors, older doors. Would be perfect for a situation like this.
So, also, thank you for shifting the house back. The proportions are, I think, work well with the site. This is just a suggestion. I would be willing to vote on this tonight as well, but I want to give you more outdoor access from the kitchen, and it feels to me like the deck could be bigger, or you could swap the range and the refrigerator and give more windows out at the back of the house to the kitchen, to the backyard, more visual access. I realize you probably have a sheer wall in there, which is preventing that. But other than that, I think that it's clear that a lot of thought has gone into this, and we appreciate you incorporating our comments from before. So with that, I actually didn't have any questions. They were all answered for me. You had an additional comment. Did you want to come up and make that at this time?
Yeah, I'll just make a couple of quick ones here. As far as the property line issue goes, I just wanted to let everyone know that my contract with Marin was not to set pins, and I was going to contract with them separately before we began construction to set pins. So any pins that are out there were not set by me. And I read the title report, that marker that they're seeing is obviously the old marker from the portion of the lot that was there before my lot exists on two older lots, portions of two older lots. I don't mind going higher. I can also reduce the height of the garage ceiling by bringing the apron up 7 inches or so. I've got an 8-foot ceiling designed in there. I can reduce it to a 7/6 ceiling and grab a few inches there. I don't mind going up another foot. It doesn't bother me at all. I know that the driveway is, the half bath was the initial big problem. Now the driveway is the other problem. So, I was concerned about height because height seemed to be the major issue for the neighborhood and the neighbors. So I was trying to keep the height down. Now that the building is shifted back, the height is not such a critical issue because it isn't going to make the difference that it made when the building was in its original position. So I don't have a problem with going higher.
We'll let you make those adjustments, and we're looking forward to seeing your final drawings. Okay. Can you do it in 30 seconds or less?
Yes. While you said that 12'3" is the offset, it's not. 12'3" is from the corner of the old building to the end of the property. There are no offsets up here for the survey that was taken.
We can't speak to what was
No,
offset in the
you are.
Later,
You are correct. That 12.3 was added to the property. It's to the property line. You're right. It is to the property line. It's the additional property line to the.
On the corner of the old building, in both cases, you see 12'3". So the marks are there from the survey that was taken because I took a good look at that at home.
Yeah.
And we're going to further do some
It is 12 foot, I stand corrected, it is 12 foot 3 dimension from the property line of the existing the existing property line, we'll call it new property line, to the older property line.
To the old building.
It also looks like the old property line.
That's right.
Okay.
Doesn't prove it.
Just who owns it?
We're going to wrap up our comments on this item and move to item 8. Thank you. Announcements. Are there any announcements?
We have your work plan.
So we're done with this item.
Yeah.
We're done. So, thank you.
We have your work plan for 2014, which we are asking you to review, and it will go to the City Council for their review. You cleared the decks in 2013, which is great. It's going to allow us to focus on our general plan update in the new year, finalizing the housing element. As you reviewed earlier this evening, start the next housing element.
Excuse me, would you mind speaking outside?
Were any of our accomplishments appealed in any way?
Or repealed?
Well, yes.
Actually, to shorter the ones that actually didn't.
I'll give you the appeal news first, and then I'll give you some good news. Yes, University Village, there were 2 appeals that were filed, one on December 19th and one on December 20th, that will go to the City Council at a date that is to be determined. It will be.
Well, I think, yeah, we've put it out there now. It's March 17th is the anticipated date for the council to hear the 2 appeals.
I do want to let you know, though, St. Mary's did not face a legal challenge under CEQA, so we were a little relieved about that. We were holding our breath for about 6 weeks.
And there was an appeal on that approval.
There was an appeal, went to the City Council on November 18th, and then we had the 30-day window for potential CEQA litigation.
And the council upheld your decision without any changes.
Without any discussion.
Okay.
Yes, so going forward into the new year, we will continue to work on the general plan update, finalizing the housing element, initiating the efforts for the new housing element, continuing our efforts with the Measure D working group, and last year, we had an initial discussion on the wireless ordinance and potential amendments that will be coming back to you this year. And we have a consistent load of current planning applications. We have 1 wireless application that we expect to come to you in February, a number of residential remodel applications, a couple of single-family home projects, and the Public Works Maintenance Center. Interestingly enough, Safeway is going to be coming back to us with a remodel, hopefully in the spring. Still to be determined.
New information you do expect Safeway to be active this year.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's something very different or something the same?
After the submittal that they made in April of 2012 for a new store design, they realized that was going to be too cost prohibitive, and so they decided to abandon that scope, and they're going to be doing a remodel of their existing store, potentially relocating their standalone pharmacy at Carmel and Solano to the store. So doing a modest expansion to accommodate the pharmacy and then modernizing the store.
So I don't have the exact date yet, but this will be going to the City Council. The City Council has in the past reviewed these. I get the impression from Penelope that this year they'll be taking a little bit more careful look at the work plans. And one of the things they want to be able to do is have the commissions and committees use this work plan a little bit more diligently. So for example, if during the course of the year you decide, well, this would be the time to decide what you might want to add to the work plan and get council approval for that. If during the course of the year a new issue emerges that you want to talk about and introduce to the City Council, that would be fine, but you'll have to get the council's approval to basically add it to the work plan. rather than just kind of automatically being able to send things to the council independent of what the overall work plan that they're giving to you. So if there's something that you feel like that you might want to raise, have the council think about, this would be an opportunity to consider that. And then the council may come up with something on their own that says this is what they want you to work at on that's not on here. And then again, of course, that the expectation would be the commission would dive into that issue.
Right, well, the general plan and the housing elements, plural, are probably enough.
Yeah,
in and of
you're not going to
themselves.
have any, you'll be here till 11 o'clock.
But, you know, like the, Measure D working group, which is sort of a subset of both of those, we've had a lot of discussion about second units and, trying to find ways to promote them and make them easier to do and things like that. So you might consider enumerating that specifically. And that just puts them on notice that that's what we intend to do anyways.
What is our general plan schedule? Will we finish that in 2014? Is that too ambitious?
It's very ambitious. The tape is running, I'm going to be held accountable for this. I would, we're going to try. There's a lot of things, we've made an enormous amount of progress on the housing element, and we feel like that part of it is kind of on the final lap, hopefully. But there are a lot of other subject areas that deserve a lot of attention. We have a schedule that we need to update. It's been a couple months since we've looked at it, but theoretically, we were bringing this to a close at the end of 2014.
Yeah.
The EIR consultant is doing their work. They'll have start doing some public meetings with all that in the near future. The reason I kind of hesitate is the nature of general plans as things pop up that you don't think about and don't anticipate, and we have to go off and do a little bit of work on one thing or another that's not in the schedule. That's okay if that happens. That probably will happen. But if that doesn't happen, then yeah, we could be finished by the end of 2014.
Okay. But you probably wouldn't recommend changing what you have. What you have, the goal you have is continue the general plan update process. Probably
Right.
as appropriate and risk averse as we dare.
I mean, if you make some progress on it in 2014, even if you don't get it finished in 2014, I think if you can make substantial progress, you can count it as a really good year for the commission.
Okay. What else?
Okay.
So if you want to, I think it would be appropriate for the commission to.
Was there a zoning amendment that's coming forth having to do with the housing element? Isn't there? And should that be on this list?
Well, we might, there are some zoning, there are some embedded in the approval of the housing element is some policies and programs that we'll have to implement.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit premature to call those out until the council actually approves it. But yeah, you could add, it may be appropriate to add a bullet point that says implement policies and programs in the housing element.
Yeah.
The state would like that.
Because we would have, if the council goes along, emergency housing, I think that requires.
Yep. The second units, some of the other, kind of like I'm a little fuzzy on all those programs, but there are 36 or 38 or something of them that we need to do.
Well, why don't we add that bullet? That's good. Yeah.
So this is up for a vote?
Yeah, I think it would be good if the commission could make a motion and vote on a recommendation to the council on this. The other committees have been doing that.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the draft work program with the edits we've just discussed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to item B,
New chair and vice chair for 2014.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you. This has been a great opportunity to grow, and I appreciate the opportunity to be chair this year.
Oh, you did a wonderful job. It's tough meetings.
So, and I
Thank
look forward.
you.
Oh, you're
Yes.
welcome.
Well, I personally would like to go ahead and nominate Doug Donaldson as chair and Nick Bilch as vice chair.
I'll second that nomination.
Any regrets? I mean, any?
No, not at all. Thank you for the nomination.
Okay, good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great.
Okay,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
So that starts next meeting?
Next meeting.
Great.
Okay. Next meeting, all right.
Well, we just whizzed through that.
Yeah. So the next item, the deadline for receiving correspondence, this was something Commissioner Moss asked to be added to the agenda at our December meeting, and have some discussion amongst the commission, review of the council policy. The council practice, if correspondence is received, the cutoff time is 12 o'clock. If something is received after that, it's still considered part of the record, but if anything is received after that time, they don't.
12 o'clock on the day of the
The
meeting.
day of the meeting, yeah, they don't. Don't read it.
It would, just a little background, it was getting difficult for me to get things at 4 and 5 o'clock and be able to sit down and read them and then be there at the meeting, so I'm asking for a cutoff time that staff no longer accepts correspondence past noon on that meeting day. That if they want to have correspondence, it needs to be presented to us at the meeting. So,
And is this members of the public, or is this specific to an applicant who decides that they want to make a last-minute change, or, give us some new information?
It's
or
not,
both?
it's more the bigger projects that we're getting 20 pages at 4 o'clock.
I know. I know, and sometimes we see them when we walk in here.
I don't have time to read everything here.
I can't digest something that I'm
Yeah.
reading for the first time and trying to listen to other thing and do other thing now.
Yeah,
I agree.
and I can say from our last meeting, when we touched upon this, just very briefly, I was getting emails up until about 6:28. So from about 5 o'clock to 6:28, I had another 6 emails come in, which at that point, the commission is getting here, and you don't have proper time to read through that.
So this just make people angry? And then how do we deal with the other side?
Oh, they'll be angry anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what would probably be best, I mean, if someone submits correspondence, it's still part of the public record, but if
Right.
you establish a policy that, your cutoff time for reviewing this is at noon, I think that's reasonable.
And if it's stated, on the city's website as such, or, if someone calls and asks, as they send something at 3 PM, send them back a quick note saying, I'm sorry, but things that are received after noon on the day of a meeting may or may not be read by the council members or commissioners or whoever.
That's good.
Yeah, that's actually very nice.
I like that. That's better.
It may be.
That's better than a blanket deadline. But, I mean, sometimes if the process makes people angry, it just hurts all of us in making a decision. If we have process problems, we all look bad.
And we'll glance at these last minute ones the best we can, and not if they're coming in
Right.
minutes before the meeting. But if there's something that really jumps out that we feel like that we need to draw to the commission's attention, we'll do that. We generally don't do that, but let's say it's a letter from an attorney or a new issue that if you've already gotten 20 emails on not taking a position on something, and there's 5 more, I don't know if you really, the marginal benefit of those last 5 may not be much, but if there's a new issue that you don't know about yet, maybe we would call that to your attention.
And I
You could
think
do that in the staff presentation, if there's a new issue that's come to light that we haven't considered.
And if there's a substantial change to a design review application, you can say, we already noticed this 2 days ago, and we will need to renotice it. You know?
Well, that's actually should be done that way,
Yeah.
because the drawings have been posted and they make changes.
And I know it makes more work to have to do that, but and you don't like to do that. I think minor modifications, we do that over the course of our discussion, but anything, substantial or major, and I know it's a judgment call.
Well, I think it's a good policy. We need to be a little bit more careful with some of our projects that are getting challenged legally. So,
It may be a good idea to reach out to the members of the community that tend to write in on the last day. There are members of the Albany community that have a lot to say and contribute, and maybe we could reach out to them and let them know that this is going to be implemented. I was even thinking of like Arrow and I don't know if you have contact information for any of the organizers of the Guild Tract, but we could let them know now.
Yeah, we'll certainly try to do that.
Okay. It's for discussion.
We need to vote on this? No.
No, just for discussion.
So you'll start to put the word out and try to implement it at the next meeting then, or, okay, or?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
we're going to give them a big red kill switch.
What can we expect at our next meeting? So there's a possibility that I'll be absent.
Yes, we will have the housing element coming back to you. I believe there are 3 residential remodels, a zoning clearance, and that may be enough. I should just caution you now, we are getting a consistent flow of applications, and I think it's reasonable to expect that you'll be looking at upwards of 4 to 5 applications going forward. We're certainly flagging what we can if it looks like it can go on the consent calendar, but construction is booming and people are making improvements, so.
The economy is back.
The economy is back.
Hallelujah.
Is our next meeting at 6:30?
It would, guys, it would.
7 o'clock. We're going to do our best to hold to a 7 o'clock start time going forward.
Next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're at
10 o'clock finish. Oh, no.
Oops.
Yeah, the 7 o'clock, it helps the folks who are programming the cable channel if we try to be more consistent about the start time. And so we're going to kind of we'll continue to squeeze in the general plan stuff first, but this is kind of the way it will work best for us.
Okay,
So then-
meetings, don't we have a January 30th meeting?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We have a January 30th meeting here in the council chambers for the Measure D working group. We will have an agenda and materials posted on Friday afternoon.
Okay, and with that, the next meeting is February 12th, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Nice job.